What's up, all you hitchhikers? We got another episode of The Strange Road coming at you. I'm your host, Mikey. Of course, as always, the bro host, Bub. And today we have Stoner and Disbrow hanging out in master control. Those guys are always dialing it in. We got that big camera look. There it is.
Hey-o. Hard at work in there, hitting lots of buttons, making sure it's all running smooth.
Look at all those
Hey,
screens.
I want to say this, though. Just appreciate that when we do these shows, we turn off the fan that we usually have.
And those guys
that cools that office.
cook.
So they shut that door. All of that stuff starts humming.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure. They might get a little bit of BPUs and the, hairs on the heads might be standing up. But
like
it definitely gets hot because
like
you hear that fan right after the show's over. Like
brick oven. Yeah, that door opens. Kicks on. So today
gotta
we're
appreciate it.
It's during the day, so the AC is gonna be kicking in there for those guys.
Yep.
So staying cool. As always, you guys can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at The Strange Road. The Facebook group is Rockin' Strange Road Hitchhikers. And YouTube, we always like to keep these live streams and all of our premieres and everything completely ad-free. A great way to support the show is the Super Stickers, Super Chat. We really, really appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, share. If you love the content, let people know about it.
Yeah.
And then also you can find us on Spotify, Apple, Google, and pretty much anywhere where you get your podcasts.
Yep.
Give us that 5-star rating. We really appreciate the hell out of you guys, all the listeners. And I think we got a hell of a show today, Bub.
We do.
First of all, how are you feeling?
I'm great.
Yeah? Feeling
Saturday,
loose?
I think we were talking about it earlier, like time is just flying by. I feel great. Yeah, I feel great. It's been good. Sorry. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
I'm wonderful for today, Saturday.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, let's hop into it. We're going to introduce our guest for tonight. Please welcome California transplant, now living in Michigan, host of Kill the Mockingbirds Podcast, songwriter, rapper, and audio engineer, Sean Chris. What's happening, Sean? How are you, brother?
I'm good. What's up, fellas?
Great. Doing great.
What's up, dude?
Just living the life. I'm getting pumped up, like I was telling you before, for football. I'm a big football guy, so it's our time. I was like, church is back.
Sean is a big Michigan fan for anybody that's wondering. And of course, we're right here in the capital of Ohio, in the backyard of the Ohio State
epicenter.
Yeah, so we had to talk a little trash, but came to the conclusion that we both want OSU and Michigan to be good all the time.
You want to play the best.
Just makes for a better season.
You want to play the best.
And, potentially getting both of those teams in the college football playoffs is always a blast.
It's going to be
best rivalry in all sports. All sports.
You got it.
You said it.
Hands down.
You said it.
Absolutely. So, Sean, with you got the show cooking, also your music, huge fan of. I mean, the production of, what you're creating for yourself and also collaborating with other artists all over the place. The music that you do for your podcasts and the intros. I know you're a big part of all that. And then also, the dynamic of the show with yourself and Joel Thomas, the co-host, who's been on our show. We just love what you guys are doing. You're killing it. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find you if people are interested in what you're doing.
I appreciate that. You can find everything, the music, the podcast. We even have a disinformation portion of the site now, and merch up, killthemockingbirds.com. That makes it easy. Instead, you can find the socials on there, everything in a one-stop shop. Instead of having to, because at first we were saying like, I was like, we need to get a website, man. I can't remember all these names, man. It's a lot of stuff to keep up with. Because we were saying the Telegram for a while, and then we're like, just go to the website, man. It makes it a lot easier. That's pretty much, I think, everything. And what we do pretty much is, I started like this podcast in like 2020. Like everybody, like a ton of people started in 2020 because we're like, well, nothing really to do. I was like, bars are closed, can't go to the bars, so got to figure out something else to do, and started getting into it. And my whole thing is like to meet in the middle. I'm more of a middle type of person. I want to see what everybody's perspective is, because I hear one guy yelling on, it has to be this and it has to be this, and I'm like, man, when you get two stories, you usually want a little bits right here, a little bits right here. And I use the same technique with all news and like conspiracies, paranormal, all that. I want to hear everybody's thoughts on it, because I think there's a little pieces in everything. And it started out just like kind of like deciphering propaganda and trying to really make an impact because it was during the whole, red alert stuff that, that's for the YouTube censors, which everybody knows once you say 2020, what I'm talking about, that there was so polarizing views on both sides and we couldn't hear anything. Like I remember when I was telling people about Kerry Mullis and some guy was like, where'd you find that on YouTube? I'm like, he did invent the PCR test. So, won a Nobel Peace Prize for it. And then that's when I knew like, oh, wow, people are really polarized. And I wanted to kind of get people together. And I started off doing lives and talking to all kinds of different people. But then you also get some characters that sometimes say wild things that you're like, whoa, hey, let me let you go, man. It's like, right. I could imagine how when people call into radio stations, I'm like, that's why they have somebody screen everybody.
Sure.
Because I was letting people hop on the lives and they were saying things I didn't agree with.
Getting some hot takes.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's ballsy because you never know. We run like virtual events and stuff like that, and it always comes up. It's like, well, do you open up the line to have somebody come on virtual? It's like unless you know
screen that
what kind of number one equipment or you vetted this person or talked to them, bringing them up on stage during a live event. that's nice.
Playing roulette. Yeah, that's roulette.
There was one bad incident where I switched it up. That's where I was like, I don't think I could do, because I wanted to have like a people's forum. I really wanted, in this spectrum of what we talk about, there is some incels, to be quite honest, and people that are like obsessed with certain topics that it has to be this. These are the bad guys. And if you don't talk about this, or this is how it is, and you get a lot of that polarization echo chamber. I started like kind of bringing on guests and then just breaking down stuff. And then when I met Joel, because Joel had already came on the podcast probably like 5-6 times. And we had like our first show actually completely erased. Typical Joel antics, which I would learn later. You know what I mean? Like literally like we were on Instagram Live and it just went boop and kicked us both off. I didn't have it didn't record on my Roadcaster. Wow. Didn't record on Instagram. I was like, damn.
I was about to say, Joel, like some people are like a haunted man or a haunted woman. Joel is like a whatever it is. Like he's got like a buzz about him that has that kind of aura. There's just, where it's like, did my line just get cut? Did it sound like somebody just clicked in on that and now they're listening? Because I keep saying, dude, in a lot of episodes, I'm like, I think Joel's right about Project Bluebeam with all this stuff that's coming out. I'm like, I'm not sure. Because like it feels like everything's boiling plate hot, and like I'm just like every time, like I think he was spot on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's where we kind of came up with it together, because we both we have difference of opinions on things, but we have a lot of the same goals and the same like route we're taking. The routes might be different, but the end goal is we kind of like, hey, this is how it should be. And we both think it's important to question everything, like as far as like push back on like, hey, well, what is up with Bluebeam? Hey, what is up with this? Is this a thing? Instead of just like, oh, we're all in. Like we get a lot of stuff for flat earthers. Flat earthers are not. They're about to not be our friends too, because we got in September we got a little gift for them coming from on our Shadow Bat Syndicate show. We're gonna get a little skit going.
Dude, you guys don't play. I love it. You don't hold back. That's like again, like I said, much love, much respect for what you guys are doing, because our show's a fun show. There's a lot of the topics that you guys cover that Bub and I have been into and have been aware of and on the radar, and we dig into on our Strange Happenings shows where we kind of get to play around with a lot of the stuff that you guys touch on. So to be able to have Joel on and kind of mix it up a few months back and have you on to kind of bring some of this whether it's psyops or these kind of institutional things that we kind of see happen, but people just kind of blow off as just nothing to see here. But someone like yourself sees these things kind of unfolding in the public, and your eyebrow kind of raises, and you start digging in, which we respect that and love what you guys are doing. And so when Joel came on board, was that last year or the year before? How long have you guys been co-hosting together?
Over a year now. It started like May. Like I said, we did a podcast before a couple times. And I had wanted to ask him for a while, because I work better with a partner. I could do some like shows, and I'm doing my little solo show, but I prefer to have like a bounce back, because it just helps you in like comedic timing, coming up with, because sometimes someone would say something and you're like, oh man, I could come back with this to make it funnier. It just helps. And we both have that chemistry of like wanting to be creative, and that we both believe that it's all connected. Like somehow, we don't know how.
Right.
Like I don't have like claim to be like, hey, here's the blueprint of everything, but
right.
With the occult, paranormal, conspiracies, the propaganda, we're like, there's bits and pieces everywhere. So that's like where we connect. And then we went hard in May. Yeah. And then we just started going boom, boom. And then let's be consistent. Cause before Joel too, it was harder. Cause like sometimes you need a person too to push you. You know what I mean? Yeah. You need someone that's going to be like, hey man, we got to get this done. Cause if you don't, you're like, I'll get later. Right. And then, you know, you upload 10 episodes in one day and you're like, oh man, I got to catch up. So then we started becoming that, hey, let's drop one a week. Let's be consistent. Now we're trying to like add a little bit more elements to it. And that comes with having other people. Like now I don't have to run the Instagram. He can help me run the Instagram. He helped with the website. Like instead of like feeling overwhelmed where you're like, man, I don't think we're going to get this done. Like I was talking about the website for 2 years, you know, like, yeah, it's going to come, guys. Like I had it like the domain saved, you know what I mean? I'm like, I got the domain, like just the rest of it. But having a partner that's like, just as passionate as trying to become successful and passionate about the topics we talk about, it really makes a good team. And that's why we work well together. Plus, we don't really take a lot of stuff personal. And even like on our off the air stuff, like we talk that's where it started because we talk so much. I was like, dude, you want to just like be the host, man? I've been trying to look for a host and I wanted to ask you. I just thought you were busy because you're doing music and stuff. He's, oh man, I've been wanting to be on a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, there you go.
That's hilarious.
Dude, you guys are great together too. You're both musicians. You both care about the quality. You're both kind of, you know, in production in some way or another. So it shows. The quality comes through. The dynamic comes through. We're just super stoked to see, you know, where you guys have since we've been following you, just where the show's heading. And keep it up, man, for real. But I wanted to talk to you about, you know, propaganda is something that we think that, well, America doesn't do propaganda. You know, the Russians do propaganda. China does propaganda.
Everybody does.
The Nazis
propaganda.
did propaganda, but, you know,
everybody does.
We're someone, well, we don't do that to other people, right? I mean, you know, what do you find kind of the root of where that started here in the U.S. and kind of where you see where we are now with what you're seeing?
Most of it goes back to, like we were talking before, Edward Bernays, like right before we started recording. Edward Bernays was huge because he's like, I think he's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And so he took the art of psychology and put it into propaganda / PR. So PR is just the same thing as propaganda. Like marketing things to people is a similar tactic. It's the same tactic, just for different reasons, right? Like most propaganda is like, hey, we want to go into this war. Like you know, we see the Disney cartoons where you're like, man, Donald Duck's fighting the Nazis, man.
Right.
We should join in. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
dude.
Maybe we should fight up.
Walt Disney was a huge part of that.
Oh, huge.
Sure.
Huge.
Curry favor for yeah.
And I think that those campaigns we started seeing first was like, for instance, I think they came up to Edward Bernays and they were like, man, we want to sell more sausage or something like that. And they were like, man, breakfast, eggs, sausage, bacon. There you go. Or I'm not sure if it was sausage, but it was one of those products, one of the meat products that they wanted to sell more.
It was something like
so
that.
they came up with the idea of breakfast.
It was something like that because it wasn't a very high valued meat.
Well, I think it was bacon because the underbelly, they're like, we don't have any, there's so much fat that they didn't have any way to, you know, use it for much. So stripping it and then figuring out how to sell it. Yeah. And Bernays with the breakfast. See, I didn't realize that was Bernays. I heard that story. All these things I've heard about,
I feel like
just never had a name to it.
I feel like he also did, and you might know if I'm wrong on this. I'm not sure. I might have to look and correct myself later, but I feel like he did the I Want You Uncle Sam poster. Like that was one of his.
It's possible. I'm not positive on that one, though.
I feel like he was doing that for the government, right? So before he ever went and figured out how to advertise something, they were using him for war efforts. How to get people to enlist, how to go into it, etc. So he was kind of doing war propaganda to start.
You're exactly right. I just looked it up.
Yeah, so
you're exactly right.
He was pulling people in, and then afterwards, he started thinking, "Can I use this in the public sector?" This was nothing that had been used before. They're like, "Hey, can you get people that like? Can we make them want to fight in a war?"
Bacon.
And then he's like, "Can I go do this with other things like?" And that's like Sean was saying. That's where it's born. That's where PR and all of your advertising and all. That's where all of that comes from. Is he just started figuring out what does this mean to people versus, Is it a car that, gets you, like I said, 40 miles a gallon and is reliable? Or does it make you feel like you're a celebrity because you're driving it? Like, that's what you get told now. If you buy this item or this, you're going to feel this way about it versus this is what the product will do for you, or its reliability, or what happens.
This is why you need it. This is why you need to do this. It's always, this is why.
How it's going to make
you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If I don't have that. Yeah, I don't have that car. I can't do this. Or like, I need this specific thing. Or, hey, we need to go to war because, hey, these guys are really bad. And I think they took a lot of that stuff, too, because around that same time when Edward Bernays is coming up, you got propaganda from, the Nazis, Stalin propaganda, all that stuff as well. And a lot of people don't realize that Hitler stole a lot of his propaganda. It was the same propaganda as Stalin, because everybody uses fascists and communists. To me, it's the same thing, man. It's really the same thing. I think they just like rebranded them, because if you look at some of the old Hitler posters, they are identical to the Stalin posters. Yeah. And they said that what they did was they made a few changes because people weren't really liking the idea of how Stalin ran things, because they already saw how it was. So they tweaked the little things and go, poop, there you go. And like now it's more presentable. Yeah. And what they want is they want you. That's why like now the propaganda has switched and they're like, a nationalist is bad, right? They associate a nationalist with Hitler because that's what they wanted. Like, hey, be prideful in your country. But what people don't see is that it's just forms of manipulation and to get you and push you into directions that they need you to go. And that's how they were like, hey, well, look how well it's working over here. What? And remember too, that at the same time, you had eugenics programs going on in the United States of America, which also Hitler was a big fan of. So I think they were trading a lot of ideas at that time of like, hey, whoa, that's some good propaganda over there. And like you said, at first, people assume that it's like, oh, outsiders, they do propaganda because they're trying to say like, talk bad about us. Then as it progressed, they go, yeah, well, we do propaganda too, but not here. Not here. We only out there because we have to protect ourselves. And then, we got Operation Mockingbird, which blew it open, and which is actually why I call it Kill the Mockingbirds, because I was like, I'm always been deep into the Operation Mockingbird. Just like, that's why I don't trust the media, because I'm like, all right, yeah, is that a real story?
Right.
Let me go check it out. And
really hard
what's
sometimes to figure it out. Yeah, yeah.
And when did that come out? Because that's an actual, people don't realize, but that's a real declassified document that actually had Senate committee hearings over.
Project Mockingbird, you mean?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the actual project and how it came to light, if you can?
Yeah, they had the church committee. So that was, I think, in 75, 76. Like, the program had been around for a long time. Like, Operation Mockingbird, if people do not know what that is where they were infiltrating media, not always people-wise, but pushing stories or having like, editors, different news readers, like that they would implant stories.
Some way where they would embellish. Get their hand on it.
Yep. They would embellish on things to push the court of public opinion their way, because that's the most important thing that everybody's trying to get, is because you can't have everybody against if nobody wants to go to war, there's no way you can go to war because you're going to get a revolt. So they have to figure out a way to like, how can we make them want to go to war?
How do we sell
and then
bombs
they would go
and guns, and how do we sell tanks and we got to sell these F-16s. We got to go to war. We got to get this money.
Makes a lot of money. War makes a lot of money.
Huge amounts of money.
Yep.
And that's really what they use it for. Or that was the like, it seemed to be, and different things that they wanted, right? Like, if you wanted like people to be a certain way, I believe that like a lot of like this ties between like where there's racism and people separating people by race. I believe that's a lot of propaganda.
For sure.
People get upset with that. And I'm like, no, it's true, because they don't want the working class to speak to each other. They want you to hate someone based on their culture, the skin color, or not necessarily hate, but you're like, yeah, well, they're a bad guy. Like, I've heard people tell me before, like, man, you know, there's cities in Mexico. You're like, yeah, there's cities in Mexico, man. Like, it's not. What do you think it was, mud huts?
Wait. What do you mean? Like, they didn't think like Mexico had like real
people
infrastructure and cities?
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Well, they see like all the border cities, right, and where all the bad stuff happened. I'm like,
sure.
Oh, well, I always tell people, go to Gary, Indiana. You're not going to think USA's doing very well either.
No. Yeah. We just drove through Gary on last weekend, coming back from Chicago.
Yeah, dude. We've got some wild zones in the U.S. still.
And that's where the Jackson 5 grew up.
Yeah.
But that's part of the propaganda, because we were like, we're the good guys. We're the ones that do it right. Like American intuition and, just grit. Like, just strap up your boots, man, and we can do it. We're Americans, which is not always a bad sense because you want to have some self-worth.
Sure.
But it's not good when they're pushing into the direction of like, yeah, well, we should probably go get those Germans, man. They're bad. And I who knows about that whole thing? Like, people have their own perspective. I think a lot of stuff, in my opinion, has to happen. Like, why, I don't know. That's what I like. This whole everything's fake. I do not subscribe to that. I do not like it.
What do you
mean? It kind of gets annoying. Fake? Like they'll be like 9/11 was holograms and nobody was in the
dude,
towers.
That shit drives me nuts.
It's so annoying, dude.
And I've talked to Joel about, Tartaria and some of these other things that are kind of just smoke screens in a way for what's really going on with ancient history. I mean, there might be something to Tartaria. I don't know. I haven't looked in, but I don't like when all of a sudden this thing comes out of what seems just from the internet that you don't have Graham Hancock or other alternative historians have ever talked about. And I've heard all these guys talk about. And then all of a sudden, it's this giant thing that's blowing up on TikTok. Everybody's doing an Instagram.
It could be. You never know. Got to get some receipts.
And to anybody that's into that stuff, hey, I just see these things that come out of nowhere. And it really raises red flags to me as some kind of a psyop or sleight of hand trick to make you look over here, when the true history of the United States is a complete mystery. The ancient history of our country is.
But you've also got your senses and your wits about you. You're like a pretty seasoned, investigator of the weird and conspiratorial, right? So like what you're saying makes sense. Anything that just meteorically has risen, when you know all the known conspiracies that are happening and the ones that kind of leak out slower, what have you. But anything that is that brand new and that like wild. Yeah, it's definitely going to give you pause where you're like, I'm going to have to look into that deeper.
But there could be something to 9/11, but then you throw the hologram, like Sean said, and it totally
it's not a hologram. The building was not a hologram.
All that.
Well, that's what we believe is intentional. So we've been talking about this, and actually we did an episode on this before we like really united as far as like, me and Joel are the podcast, because Kill the Mockingbirds is both of us. You know what I mean? Like.
Sure.
Before that, he was just a guest, right? And we were talking about Cass Sunstein. You're gonna always hear us every now. If you don't hear Nephilim, it's either gonna be Nephilim or you're gonna hear about Cass Sunstein. But Cass Sunstein wrote a paper, and we do have it on killthemockingbirds.com because we think it's important. We've been telling people for the last few years that this is an important document to read called what's it? Now I'm blanking. Right? It's called man, I can't even think of it. But his paper basically let me just look it up real quick.
My bad.
No worries.
Take time.
Yeah, we're good, dude.
It's weird when you're talking about something all the time, and I'm like, why do I not know? Oh, got it. Before I even looked it up now, of course, cognitive infiltration. So this paper in 2008, he wrote about the importance of getting involved and infiltrating conspiracy theorist groups, especially 9/11 inside job groups. Wow. And he said, like, there is truth to conspiracies. There, even though some of them like Watergate, and he named a couple other ones that have, they were conspiracies, but they turned out to be true. Mm-hmm. He thinks it's important to disrupt these groups by joining them and giving them different information, like some good, some bad. Mm-hmm. So it mixes the pot up. So that's why when you're like, yeah, there's something in 9/11, but then you're like, yeah, they were holograms and it was all CGI, and the towers were so then when someone like me comes to that guy again and goes, yeah, man, you heard about that? Oh, let me guess, it's a hologram. You're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying probably was, explosives. I mean, there's a lot of evidence. Like, we're going to point to evidence. Now, do we know for a fact that this is? No, but at least we come and present some evidence. They don't even have to present evidence anymore. Just go, yeah, crisis actor. And I'm like, I believe that things, not only on a quote level, but just on a level of like getting people to believe something. You have to really you can't be like, yeah, 3,000 people died. They had to, because it wouldn't be believable, because that's 3,000 people. That's hard to get 10 people to lie, 5 people to lie with you to not crack. You're going to get 3,000 people and all these families.
Right.
How is that all faked?
Ask their families. It's real to them.
Yeah.
Like, that's
They
terrible.
just don't get it.
Right. And that's just.
But what happened is, because of that paper, which I believe, and Cass Sunstein, he was part of the Obama administration. And I believe that they were infiltrating a lot of this stuff. And I think, like, when you get things like Flat Earth, when we got Donald Marshall, when you get Q, right? all these the Shannon Shruks. I don't want to say it on here because everybody gets nuked, but the things in 2012, the shootings and things of that nature, right?
Oh yeah.
The crisis actor. This all popped up after 2008 when he wrote this paper, and he thought that the importance of infiltrating these groups. And I was like, oh, why is it all suddenly that flat Earth is huge? Why is Tartaria huge? I know that people may have the Earth's flat, but they didn't really explode until like 2012, 2011. Donald Marshall, I was in a clone facility. It's just too fantastical, and I believe it is
ridiculous.
Down with the clones.
The clone thing is always looped into some Q conspiracy.
You don't think there's any cloning going on at all?
No, I'm not sure. To say that. No. I think there is some kind of.
Oh, okay. Then what do you mean? I'm trying to follow you. There is cloning and there's not cloning.
I think he means like everybody's not a clone. It's the same concept. Yeah. Like they're like, Jamie Foxx is acting weird now here.
Oh no. I mean, not everybody.
Like they popped out this new clone of him, and then I don't know if it's that deep,
but I mean, there are the movies where it's like you get
here's a perfect example.
You get the clone of yourself when you need the new organ. They just take it from. I can't remember what the name of that film was. It was a couple years ago. I mean, there are all these like weird precursors sometimes where like you see these sci-fi kind of references to. What again we hopefully will get to one day is cloning, like do a lot of things. You want a liver, you can just clone a liver for yourself. You don't need to have hopefully a black market out there where somebody's just getting their liver taken. Whatever, I don't want all that happening. Like, so let's figure it out. But
my example is when that dude in the NFL got
Damar Hamlin
got hit in the chest.
Yeah.
And, that dude died, and they show him up and he's got his hoodie up, and they show him up in the press box. Like, there's no way that's really him in the that's a clone. Then the whole internet thinks that he's a clone.
Yeah, that happened.
And I'm like, God, that spread so fast. That was so quick.
Oh, yeah.
That to me, just the acceleration of all that whole storyline with him, I'm like, no, guys, let's just everybody calm down here. Like you said, not everything is a freaking conspiracy. You got to have some kind of not everything's black and white. There's so much gray matter in between.
No, but that's a real phenomenon,
you
too.
Might
like,
find,
if you
not
get
find
hit
out for
in the
10
chest
years
hard
later.
enough, it'll stop your heart. That's what happens. It's like
agree.
It's like RNT
well, I think that
was saying that it's not.
There was
right.
That's not what I'm saying.
I think there was a conspiracy with it personally. Like, I think there was something to play, but I think it was more covering up something that actually might have caused that. That's just me thinking how I'm thinking, because the whole thing that everybody had to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
right.
Like, I think that may play a part into it, but I'm with you. Like, so they just have all these clones just ready to go. Like they did on that Tyrone. I don't know if you see they cloned Tyrone yet. We just did a little
the Netflix movie.
Yeah, with Jamie Foxx, which is interesting timing. So my take is this, right? So people say soft disclosure, which I get it. There is things that they integrate into movies, I think, to put either to prepare us for something or to actually get us to try to go in that direction, right? Like when you see these fancy computers like in Iron Man, they're like, hey, maybe that'll inspire someone to make it. Or exactly. And then they clone Tyrone. I thought it was also kind of convenient timing. And I'm not saying that they did it because of this, but Jamie Foxx probably got sick or whatever happened to him, which again, I think it was also from the thing that everybody had to get. That's what I think really happened. And I think they go, hey, now that you're feeling better, let's kind of like drag this out. And since we're dropping this movie, they clone Tyrone. Why don't you just come? You know what I'm saying? I just see it's like so convenient that he came back.
Well.
He could have came back probably a while ago and said some stuff, but I think they were like, let's hold off, man, make you look a little sick. And I'm sure there was some makeup involved, make him look a little sicker because it's promotion. Because how does it come a week or two before? I just think in that sense, a lot of times, because logically, there's no way they just have, let me get the Jamie Foxx clone 7652. Like, that's just crazy, man. Like, you know what I mean? They don't have a bunch of clones.
It's not like it's not like Westworld. It's not like Westworld. It's not dipping out a new, robot.
Well, they wipe it and
taking the bullets out of Maeve and putting her back in the bar.
Because think about all the clones, because cloning is real, and that's what we discussed on the episode. I mean, Dolly the sheep, that was sheep, goats, all kinds of animals have been cloned, but what's the accuracy of it? When I was seeing a lot of stuff, they were talking about the accuracy because he tried to debate it with miscarriage because they're reasoning for really pushing the clones in the early 2000s was like, man, you know, there's some people that can't have babies and we can help them out with that process. And the way they cloned it was different because they're cloning from the eggs and then putting in an embryo. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's a different process than what people think. Like if it's just baking in an oven, like, oh yeah, he's full grown already. In like 20 minutes, here you go. Like insta clone, introducing.
Right.
But there is good cloning technology. But how many reject ones is there though? Right? How many sloths do we have? Right? There's no way that they. It has to be. You can't be all like, oh
hey,
wow,
you guys,
perfect. You know they can't be coming out perfect.
No. Like the third time he cloned the other clone of Multiplicity. Michael Keaton cloned the one clone, and then you got.
Is he okay in there?
Hey
shaving?
Steve, come on!
I took the blade out.
Bugs.
Yeah. Is he okay in there shaving? I took the blade out already.
Yeah.
He's like shaving his tongue.
He's like, I like pizza. I like it. Opens up his wallet, sticks the piece of pizza.
So
I think that's the modern Mockingbird is the Cass Sunstein cognitive infiltration. That's like a modern Mockingbird because it has changed it. And now the spectrum of people that are questioning things, they're building these echo chambers where now critical thinking is also being put out in the conspiratorial world. So you already had the political world where people aren't critically thinking, hey, red team, blue team, red team, blue team. Now you got like, no, everything's CGI, everything's crisis actors. Or you have the groups, no, flat earth, it's only this way. Or Bigfoot could only be this. And it's like, we don't know, man. I'm on the belief of Bigfoot that so many ways to look at it.
Exactly. I agree with what you just said there is the whole, like, anytime, because we both might feel passionately about something. Mikey, myself, you, whoever. But anytime, like you said, anytime somebody's like, I'm right, you're wrong, I know this unequivocally. It's like, you do? How can you tell me you know unequivocally about Sasquatch, about ghosts, about whatever?
Yeah.
You can feel how you want to feel. You can give me compelling points that give me your opinion on why you feel that way, and I might go, you know, I could agree with that or not, you know. But again, like the flat earth, I don't know that I can go all the way there. Tartaria, I might be able to go a little further there, right, than Mikey. But there are definitely points where it's like, I can agree that you have a theory, but they're just theories until they're proven to be like the correct one.
But people will argue that Mockingbird isn't real, doesn't happen, real. They don't affect. But I'm like, they confirmed. Had Senate committee hearings.
It's confirmed.
All those documents you can read where they talk about.
Go to CIA.gov.
Yes,
and read it.
100%.
They'll tell you.
Now, some stuff is really redacted with the editors' names that were. Because here's the thing: like Sean was mentioning that this is one big. You know, you're going after Facebook groups and message boards, and it's this whole operation.
Well, Facebook was a government program to start before it became Facebook.
They had 3 channels to basically disseminate information to the producer of that news channel. You know, they're working with Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, you know, whoever it is.
Here's your story.
So there's not a whole lot of people that they really had to affect early on with these kind of operations. Now,
it was much easier.
Right.
But I actually think now that's kind of, I don't want to take that back because I think that now it was one focal point, but I think now what they do is because, you know, like you said, like you'd have Dan Rathers and everybody would be around the TV and that was pretty much the only news program that everybody watched.
Right.
So like you would be able to get the whole public, but now I think they found new tactics and where everybody goes, oh, he's a CIA. I don't think everybody is a CIA agent either. But what I think they do is they drop seeds, right? They drop little things like, oh, here's a crazy thing. Here's an idea. Somebody jumps on board with it. Boom. Now it's polarizing. And with algorithms, like I see a lot of like, I don't know if you guys know who Fresh and Fit is and that Pearl Davis and they're all like spinoffs of Andrew Tate. They're all this like where it's pitting women versus men. Like it's this gender war. Like just like we see them doing with culture. And so like Fresh and Fit, it's 2 dudes. They'll get like a bunch of Instagram models and then they'll berate them like, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. A woman should be like this. And, you know, you guys just have unrealistic expectations. And some of the things that they say are true. But to me, it's not a genuine conversation because if you really wanted to have a real genuine conversation, we would talk about, hey, these are the faults that generally, because you're always generalizing because each person is an individual.
Sure.
But if you're generalizing, hey, these are a lot of problems that men kind of present in a relationship. Hey, these are some of the problems that women present in a modern relationship. But instead, it's like, no. All these women are bad. They all just want some rich dude. And I'm like, you're talking to Instagram models. Like, what?
Right.
Respect, idiot. Like, you're talking to these Instagram models like that. Oh, these speak for all women. And then you got stupid people like Pearl Davis and I know that some of these, she has to be trolling. Like she's been on the last 2 weeks, like women shouldn't be allowed to vote. Let's reappeal. Let's revoke the 19th Amendment, because they shouldn't be able to vote. And men are smarter than women. It's proven. And there's even statistics that don't back that up, right? I think everybody's intelligence is different for everybody. It's not. Some people are math whizzes, but they couldn't be critical thinkers to save their life, right? Like they could do an equation instantly, but they'll fall for all the propaganda. To me, critical thinking is the important tool, and I think they're trying to get away from that. They want us to like think in these echo chambers. So you're seeing these modes of when you get into the Andrew Tates and these Pearl Davises, people, they're so polarizing that like I've seen some dude said this. He was like, well, until women, and this is just some commenter, he goes, until women understand that they're supposed to be men's property.
Oh my God.
I don't think we're gonna figure. And I was like, buddy,
Sweet
that's
Jesus.
called slavery.
Sweet Jesus.
It's illegal. Did he have a that's their mindset.
Did he have a club in one hand and a cave nearby that he was just gonna donk her on the head and drag her away? Like
but is
Captain
that guy?
Caveman? That
guy's an actor of some.
You can't do that.
That can't be a real person.
You can't do this.
You know what I mean?
I think it is though, because it's just a commenter, and I think that because people start, and I think it's some of the people that are saying these things are incels, right? Some guy that's just never interacting with anybody else. That's on video
is that
games.
What it's the incel thing?
I need that. Yeah, real quick, because this is a new term for me that I still struggle
Bub's
with trying to understand what the hell an incel is. I always, for some reason,
lay it on him, John.
For some reason, I always think of incel and I mix it up with Infidel. Morgan Freeman from Robin Hood with Infidel, where he's talking about Robin Hood. And I'm like, dude, Robin Hood's slaying everything out there. Women, bad dudes with bow and arrows and swords. So like when I think of incel, I'm thinking of the wrong thing. I'm thinking of the opposite of Robin Hood. I'm thinking of the guy at home that wants to be Robin Hood, but he's not Robin Hood.
It's this modern thing where like, you know, especially with the birth of like chat rooms, like, so I'm 40 years old now, right? So I just turned 40 this year.
Same in the club.
1983?
82.
Okay, hey, not bad. You guys are all right.
Yeah.
83 is a lot better, but 82 is all right. So you can relate to the, like what I'm saying is like, you know, chat rooms, we dabbled in that, but we still were going outside as kids. Yeah. We weren't focused on this, but now that we've moved to this generation where they're on Xbox Live all the time or a chat room, you get these incels, which people like to identify as like more conservative or like right-wing extremists because they're but it goes on both sides. Because that's how you're getting like this other push on the left where they're getting men. So basically like the definition, what they say is like groups of men that think they have trouble attracting women. Yeah. Like they can't get women. They can't talk to women. They're scared of women. So it seems, at least. So you're getting both sides of that. And they either go to this extreme where you get that 4chan guy that like, the Zionists did everything, man. The Rothschilds, man.
Yeah.
You know, going to this extreme babble of like, they think they figured it all out. Or like a flat earth, they attach to those. Or they go to that left extreme where there's this like sissy stuff where they're saying like, oh, maybe you just like, you know, you're a sissy, man. Like it's all right. Like you can be a sissy, which I don't understand. We could say all these words now. Well, I thought we couldn't say this. Like, yeah. They're pushing them into that direction. Like, hey, you can't get women because of this, and that. It's okay. That's just how you are, because they don't interact with people. They're overstimulated, but under like they don't have real human interactions. And some of them are come from broken homes or never learned that from their parents. So now they're in this whole spectrum. And that's where I think a lot of these mass shootings, which could also be attached to SSRIs, I think a lot of it also is on that Xbox Live and Discord, because that's where somebody, like, if someone's going to infiltrate, like, they're going to get them on Xbox Live. They're talking to 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds where they're like, yeah, you know, like, man, maybe you want to try to do this. You know, are you upset? They find the kids that are troubled. They probably go through so many. And the FBI has already been proven that they've done this with Middle Eastern, after 9/11, the Middle Eastern immigrant, that they were telling them, like, having an FBI agent go with them and, like, you know, be a female, a loner, somebody that has no friends, no family. And they're like, hey, man, this girl really likes me. And then she's like, I don't know, you want to, like, blow something up or something? And he's like, yeah. Like, does that mean I get to,
Right.
Yeah. Right. So they push that narrative. And I think that's how they get people attached, because these dudes don't know how to talk to chicks, which is weird, because I know we grew up with some, you know, there was a shy kid or the ones that had trouble, but there's just these mass amounts of men now, because they're adults, that don't know how to speak to women, and they only watch what they've seen through like porn or videos or like these music videos or anything like of that nature or movies, and that's the way they try to like approach it. And you're like, dude, you can't. That's not. Just be a regular person. You know, be funny, be interesting. But they're not telling them that. The Andrew Tates and these other dudes are telling them, feeding them like, no, it's not your fault. It's because these women aren't acting right. Women should be in the kitchen. Women shouldn't dress like this. Women should, and then they do break some good points where like, oh, you know, men are loneliest, men commit the most suicide, which these are true facts, but they're not speaking on why. And to me, it's like they do say video games and things of that nature, but that doesn't mean you can't play video games either. They go all out. They say like, if you play video games, it's about balance. Exactly.
We were kids. We played video games. We still went outside. We're like everything is still balanced.
They weren't as good though.
No, hell no, they weren't as good.
We couldn't talk to each other and play, you know, Halo.
Right, but we were on the internet and chat rooms and stuff. Like we did stuff like that, but like I wasn't going to spend my life in that. Yeah. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, the more appealing and the more accessible it's gotten. And again, like where we grew up, we know what community's like. Yeah. Like we have a sprawling community. Like everybody knows you if you go back home. It's just how it is. It's like going to Lord of the Rings town, right? Like they're going to know you.
Yeah. And on, like you said, on the right, you kind of have these guys that are going to the right wing, you know, they're showing up at the statue where they're trying to take the statues down. You know, like the thing that happened in Charlotte.
Oh, what happened there? What do you mean?
Basically this protest.
Like the Confederate. Like the Confederate statues, and then there's a big arguments of like, hey, there were this and that, like the right, and then the right wants to save them, and the left. And that's what's kind of funny to me. Like I thought personally in 2020, I thought when the whole George Floyd incident had like first came out, I thought it was a moment of clarity for us as a country because I am a firm believer that there is excessive police force, right? Mm-hmm. There is, like, they do police us, and we're in a prison planet, like, because I grew up on like Jordan Maxwell, Alex Jones, David Icke, like all these guys that have been like pushing, like, you know, I was a huge Ron Paul guy. I was like into the Libertarian Party for a while. I'm just like nothing anymore, but I was big into Libertarian. I like the whole, hey, don't mess with me, I won't mess with you idea. Yeah. And I think they took it and they're trying to like change it, right? They're pushing us into these new directions that we can't communicate with each other. And that's why like these new generations are kind of like lacking those skills, I guess. Like, I don't know exactly. And I think some of it comes from like parenting. I think some people got overwhelmed, and I don't want to just blame the parents, because I think it also is how society pushed, because we used to also not get fast food. Like, I mean, I get more now because I'm always like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing so much stuff. Let me just grab some food. I'm trying to get less. I'm getting back into the routine the last few months of like, hey, all right, let's stop, because it's crap anyways. Not only does it taste like crap now, like it makes you feel like crap. It tastes like crap. The workers feel crappy. It's like, I don't even want to go in here. So
I'm with you, man. It's rough. Yeah. It's not the fast food I remember eating as a kid.
No.
It's way different.
But you didn't eat it as much, I bet, right? Like,
not nearly as much. No.
Hey, you're done with fourth grade. Let's go to McDonald's.
Right.
But you didn't go every single night.
No.
You didn't go every weekend. Like, it was a special occasion. It was like, oh, hey, we're gonna go to a restaurant to.
Well, it was more scarce too.
Sports team won.
Yeah. It's more scarce.
Yeah, it's more scarce.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's everywhere.
It changed the timeline of where everything has to be now. So even like if you look at the packagings in stores, like look at the macaroni and cheese. It went from a box to now it's like these little individuals where it has to be convenient. Convenience was pushed onto us, like where everything has to be convenient, to where now people are like, even me sometimes, like I'm like, oh, the internet. And we're like, dude, we had a dial up, man, where you're like, and I'm mad that it's not loading in 5 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's too funny, man. It's really true. We're time traveling. Like, we are definitely living in the future from where we were with tech. I mean, and thinking of things that would be possible to be doing, especially like what we're doing exactly right now. This is mind-boggling.
Should have more though. We should be way further.
I agree.
Sure.
I agree. But even this is still beyond my wildest comprehension, because you think of like YouTube and all these different platforms and services. Give it 10 years ago, it wasn't that great.
No.
I mean, a lot of things have accelerated just in the last 5 to 10 years, like hard. Yeah. But we see these things on such smaller time scales, and it's almost like a time warp distortion of how, like, oh, we've had that for, like, even Spotify. How long has Spotify been around? Not that long.
2014 is kind of when I started paying for it, I think.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
not terribly long, but
no.
I mean,
a lot of it came around like 2012 and like at least the music platforms, because that was the huge thing. Because remember Napster, everybody hated Napster. The whole music industry was like, "Oh man, they're stealing our music," and I was like, "We're not stealing it. I'm just downloading it."
I feel like a lot of that too was coming from, you had like Netflix and Redbox, and you were getting the DVDs, and then it was turning into these subscription services, and then they figured out how to do like, you know, all the cloud storage and, you know, your information, or not information, but like infrastructure as a service, your platform. Like when you go to Netflix now, instead of having to get that DVD sent to you, and you can like pull that on demand, like when AWS and all those systems made all those cloud structures, and we could, like you're saying, like there it is in his behind his head Prime Video. That's all that immediacy. That's the stuff we couldn't dream of as a kid. Like, man, I was relegated to whatever was on the TV being programmed on. Like, I could look ahead on HBO or Showtime and see a movie I wanted to see in the future and be like, hey, Wednesday, I got to be here at the TV. I can't even TiVo it yet, but I know I can see into the future that they're going to play freaking Indiana Jones for me on next Wednesday. So I'll watch that.
Yeah.
I'll set a reminder or something, right? But I can't record it even yet. We don't even have TiVo yet at that time.
And that Netflix series about Spotify and how that, I haven't seen that name. It's pretty interesting how they basically hijacked the internet protocol to be able to hit, when you hit play, he was obsessed with when you hit play, he wanted it to play within a certain millisecond of hitting that button, and it wasn't good enough. Van Eck, I think it's his last name.
I can't remember. He's European or Swiss.
The coder that kind of started Spotify with him was going nuts because he's just like, it's so fast. What do you mean you need it faster? And he actually just kept digging in and figured out a way to essentially hijack that internet protocol and how it shares data in bytes, and got around that whole thing. And that's how streaming, they basically, in Spotify, the guy, that engineer invented, and I think Netflix kind of took that from them and was able to do that with video. Because before then, it was impossible to, because if you BitTorrent, they showed how the BitTorrent guys and how their structure worked. When you BitTorrented something, it was super slow. You had to aggregate all the bytes from all these other servers. And so he was just obsessed with like figuring out how to do that better and better and better.
And you know that Mark Randolph, one of the CEOs of Netflix, is the grandnephew of Edward Bernays.
Oh, shit. There you go. Wow.
Of course.
And it makes sense because they're the only ones that have no advertising, right? So that's what's interesting, because that's a different model that people are like, you know, it kind of threw this model out the window of, usually it's like, oh man, we're doing it all for advertisement. I mean, they back in the 50s, 60s, and I think even like early, like late 40s, you had whole like skyscrapers filled with offices of marketing guys that are trying to figure out ad campaigns. I mean, they made a whole show about it, right? Mad Men, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
You could see it, like, and it's just interesting that he threw it all out the window. It was like, hey, $9.99, like, and you know, it's unlimited, and that's what like they're also arguing with like the actors. One of the things, I mean, I know they talked about the AI, which is messed up. Like
that's crazy.
Generating, like if you are in one movie as an extra, they're just using you again. We're gonna use you again. But they were saying that like, oh, Netflix is not giving us royalties. They're like, well, how could they? That's not their format. Like they're not advertising. They're not reselling it. It's a one-time deal and I think they did that on purpose because it got people to get into that zone of like, oh man, like you said, well, it's going to be every Thursday. I'm going to be watching Breaking Bad, or, you know, I'm going to have to not miss it. Or then they came with TiVo. Okay, we could record it and we'll watch it later. But now it's like, oh, I can watch the whole series tonight. You know what I mean?
That's kind of burning that mode. That's kind of burning them right now, which is why they're splitting up their most popular series. The Witcher was split up. They split up the last season of Stranger Things, the last season of Ozark.
The releases and how they do that, it needs to be set out a little better.
HBO is killing it still with episodic every week. Righteous Gemstones.
Oh my God.
My favorite show right now. I love that show.
Succession. All of those shows. The Sopranos, even back in the day. Like
Sopranos is. I watched all that.
Every Sunday, you have to wait for that episode to come out. So I think like the binging part of it, I guess, is kind of burning Netflix a little bit because
I haven't watched the second part of the Witcher yet.
I'm not done with it yet.
I've watched the first half. I haven't watched the second half.
Pretty good.
I think it is burning them, but I think they're adjusting. I think everything adjusts.
Yep.
And I think that's like Netflix is for sure was a catalyst of getting everybody to the stream. Because
I
remember too when they were just like, we were one of the first people like not just the first people, but I remember when we got Netflix, because we used to have Netflix just getting the DVDs, and I remember they're like, oh, stream it now, and you're like, what, stream it?
Yeah,
like and you kind of like had that idea. And I remember that when I saw that, I was like, man, they should do this with video games. And obviously they ended up doing that, like game passes and things of that nature. And I was like, oh yeah, once they created streaming, it went. And I think you guys are right. Like 2012 to 2014, somewhere around that time, really, which is so interesting that so many of these things popped up. And on the early Netflix though, it was wild because they had so many conspiracy documentaries.
I watched, they're not there anymore.
On there.
Who Took Johnny?
All that stuff's gone.
I saw Who Took Johnny on Netflix. I thought Who Took Johnny was a Netflix series. Apparently, I was making that up or imagining that in my head. And
no, it's they put it on Netflix, but
but I thought Netflix had actually created it.
No,
yeah, I was wrong about that. I thought it was a Netflix original, but you're right, Sean. There was so many conspiracy and paranormal, and they just kind of went mainstream. I mean, they don't cover anything. I mean, Ancient Apocalypse was the most controversial thing they've had in years.
It kind of got tame. Yeah, it kind of got tamed down. I mean, I watched a lot of DB Cooper stuff on there. I mean, I've watched a lot of different. I've watched a lot of the stuff that they've had too. So maybe Epstein it did not just go away.
Not as like revealing. Like a lot of the stuff. Again, we probably dabble in it a lot. So some of the stuff I heard that. But I remember like when it was the first like streaming. I saw this one documentary that was called Gas Hole, and it was talking about the dude that invented like a car that could run 100 miles of 1 gallon of gas. Yeah. That thing is so hard to find, that documentary, and that's where I saw it, was on Netflix. And it talked about how like he mysteriously died, and like, and all of a sudden that Shell was like the Shell Corporation was like, like somehow they got a hold of the patent after years, of going back and forth, and like, we'll buy that patent, and they shut it down. Mm-hmm. And now they're like, yeah, you could go 40 miles a gallon. You're like, dude, this guy had 100. Where are we at? Like, how are we at 40? But because they didn't want that, just like the same thing with like electric cars. That's why I find it funny that they're like pushing electric cars. You're like, dude, they had electric cars. Yeah. I could go to the Ford Museum and see the electric car. But at the time, the Rockefellers were like, we got all this oil. What are we going to do with this oil? Right. The car's not going to help us. The combustible engine came along and they're like, boom, there you go.
But this is a long plan, right? Like this is a long laid out, like even what you're saying, like, okay, so they know they can do electric cars back then, but man, we're going to run this oil out until we can't get any further.
And I don't think it's necessarily all a long plan of just like a group of people thinking it out. I think like, in my opinion, how the world works is that there's all these factions, right? And sometimes they unite together because the narrative or they need their help. But for the most part, there's all these different factions, whether it be elites or governments or rich people, whatever, we don't know exactly, but there's all these like different factions across the world. And what they do is they fight with amongst each other sometimes. Yep. And I think like, hey, like we might make some money on this electric thing. And then the Rockefellers have a bigger faction that is closer to, oh, no. We got all this oil. We want this to happen. Yep. So I think the plans are constantly like changing because it's not one plan. It's not like, hey, in 2020, we're going to do this. So it's constantly, that's why it's so hard to figure out, I think sometimes, because we're like, loop-de-loops and we're like, hey, that doesn't make sense why that happened. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is because another guy was appointed in power and he's like, we're not doing it that way, we're going to do it this way. We see it all the time when you work somewhere, a new manager comes in and goes, yeah, I know you guys been doing this for 20 years and it's been working, but let's completely change everything. So like everybody's confused and everything sucks. And then you're like, all right, well, that didn't seem like a great idea. And I think that same thing happens because a lot of times when we're talking about like characters of Edward Bernays, or if they're a psyop, or are they an agent, are they an intelligent guy, what people tend to forget, or elites or occultists, they're still human beings and they still make human being mistakes. They still have, we have this like thing of like, oh, they're in the occult, they must be super smart, or is there dummy ones? Like even like I was telling Joel, I was like, there's got to be dummy Nephilim, right? Yeah. Because like sometimes they make it seem they're all smart. I'm like, there's got to be a dumb one, like, oh, which way did he go? Which way? Just looping around the island. And they're like, don't worry about Jeff over there. He doesn't know about anything.
Nephilim Jeff. He's
Nephilim Jeff. That's the T-shirt you need.
A couple cards short of a full deck. Don't worry about him.
Jeff Neff.
He's a good guy.
Jeff Neff, your local Nephilim Jeffer.
Your local NAB.
I mean, that's funny. You just brought up the electric car thing. We just had a former, corporate executive living in Detroit and a part of actually Toledo, part of the GM and Ford. He's worked for all these different car companies, telling us on the show we had electric cars back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, they were allowed to drive them. That was wild.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm down with the electric cars thing yet. I can't get behind it yet fully. I'm
not against it. Like,
I'm not against them, but I'm saying like.
But how are we going to do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't think they're figured out as well yet. Well, in just little things, like again, like it was another one about like a Ford F-150. Like the dude got into like what was a minor accident, but just because of the way they're built and all the batteries and sensors, it's like your car's like bricked now. It's like you can brick your phone, you can brick your car. You can't brick unless you do cash for clunkers and seize up the engines like we did when we did that. You can't brick another car. Right. You can fix it. And even that, you could have still taken the engine out of most of those and just put a new engine back in them.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong
I
with
think
that.
mechanical is always better personally. Like, because even if you look at like washer and dryers, like look at the digital washer and dryers compared to like the mechanical washer and dryers.
Horrible.
Those mechanical ones last forever. You're like, I just changed the belt. Like,
change the belt in a dryer. That's all. Like when your dryer stops working, it's just a belt. You just
not mine.
Open that thing.
Yeah.
Sadly, mine needs
not yours. Yours is done.
I've had mine for way too long. I'm just putting that thing out.
But you had it for a lot. Then you're cool with getting rid of them. Like,
oh yeah,
your appliances are supposed to last 20, 30 years, right? That's how we were. At least our generation, our parents. That's what they saw. And then now we're in this point of you're like, oh man, I got to get a new dryer. 5 years later, you're like, what? That's a big ticket item. I shouldn't have to buy one every 5 years.
No, not every 5 years.
And Whirlpool doesn't make them. LG and Samsung are the ones that make your washer and dryers now. Mm-hmm. Whirlpool was made in America. Like everybody in our town had a Whirlpool washer and dryer.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's like all LG and Samsung. They're all smart washers, energy efficient.
They all everything's starting to look like our cell phones.
Yeah, that's how they kind of like want it. And also too, think about this, man. If that something happens on your washer and dryer, the new ones, it's gonna cost you like $600-700 just to tell them yep, it's messed up. Like, you know what I mean? Not even talking about the repairs. So then it becomes like our cars, our phones. So what I think they've pushed society to, and this is more of just people trying to make money. I don't think this is nefarious. Like it's probably some nefarious stuff, but it's just people that want to make money. They're like, hey, we need to stop making stuff last.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
let's make it stop. So then they could buy a whole new one, and then you make it like, and make it not be able to fix because whatever happened. Remember, we used to have TV repair shops everywhere, but now they're like, just throw it away. It's going to cost you more to repair than to buy a new one. And I think they like that idea of it because it used to be like, hey, TV went out. Let me go take it to the TV repair guy. Oh, you just needed blah, blah, blah. And then you just need a new tube or you needed a new light or you need a new screen or whatever it may be. There's probably some TV guy like, man, he doesn't know nothing about TVs. There's always those guys in the comments. But now we can't fix anything. Can't fix our phones. Like we all go and get a new phone. I mean, they're great technology, but they want us to be consumers. And I think it pushes us into that, like, we can't fix things. We can't do on our own. We can't achieve. Now, there's also the people that can, right? There's people that are never going to stop. That are gonna, There's probably people right now taking apart iPhones and making something else. There's like that kid that was in that village in Africa and created Wi-Fi out of junk, right? He created his own little Wi-Fi for their island or their village. There's all these things that are capable of, but I think that our mindset, especially in the Western world, that we're so propagandized to, hey, it has to be instant, it has to be now, quick fixes for everything. So when you're talking about mental health, you're talking about physical health, you're talking about anything related to jobs, your family, everything is based around instant gratification. Hey, I need this thing to turn on and work right away. I need plug me onto the internet immediately. I need to go a place where they're going to just throw this food in a bag instantly. I'm going to be able to eat it. And I think we've built this over time. And since the 80s, you see the push slowly but surely. Yep. And we were alive to see it, that now everybody's dependent on these things and not realizing they're causing more, like all these climate change people, right? That are like, oh man, I don't see them going into craft and be like, hey, craft, why don't you just stop making individuals? Because it's convenience. You want the convenience. That's too much plastic. They're never talking about plastic.
No.
They're only talking about, hey, the working class needs to get electric stoves or get electric cars. You need to do it. It's your fault because you drive to work every day. That's the reason that we need the climate's bad. But none of these people are actually doing anything. Because when you see people like that make inventions, like I always forget the kid's name, but I think this was years ago, but he invented a net that would extract trash from the ocean.
Yeah.
You don't hear about that kid. Why is he not the head of the climate movement or like to fix things?
He's like 22, 23 now. He holds all these patents. Yeah. He's taken that trash. They're out in the Texas garbage patch right now, or the Texas-sized garbage patch in the Pacific. They are out there with that machine collecting trash. Nobody writes a feel-good story about that guy. A couple podcasts have had him on to talk about his story, and they're actually converting all that plastic into eyeglassware, flip-flops.
Yeah, using it. That's material.
And then selling it as high-item ticket items to people like Paris Hilton and these kind of trendy Hollywood people
gear.
Right, and they're selling like a pair of sunglasses for like $150.
I mean,
which is great.
I love it.
Get people to buy that stuff.
Yeah,
but you don't, like you said, you don't hear about that guy's project. Is he still getting funding because they need to reproduce?
Dude, that's such a great freaking answer. They don't want solutions, and this is, I gotta say, it's a conversation I've been having with someone here lately about like, when you're talking to people and you're trying to give them advice and they don't want to hear it, or you're trying to help them, they don't want to hear it, and you're like, what's this conversation about? Do you just want me to listen to you complain the whole time? Because I can do that, but I just want to know, like, do you want me to try to help you? Because if not, like, I'll give you like this one time, but I'm not coming here every time just to listen to you tell me why you hate what's going on, but you don't want to change anything about it. So like that whole thing of they don't want solutions. That is such a weird thing to think about, but when you say it makes sense.
We spend a lot of time debating and arguing.
Because then your budget for that problem goes away. You can't campaign to get the money for it the next year.
If we spent more time actually debating each other in a healthy way to find solutions versus just straight up fighting with each other, you're over here, it's black and white, and
right,
and there's no gray area for us to come together.
Yeah,
and then
but I'm more about doing than just sitting and talking about it. I'm much more about doing. Like you're saying too, I don't want instant gratification. Like
I want to talk.
I'm ready to grind about it. I'm ready to do what I need to do to get through it.
That's what I told climate change people that like I've seen online when I argue with them, because like I'm not against like cleaning up the planet. Like I'm not against like, hey, maybe we should not like have so much pollution. Hey, don't throw your trash on the ground. No. Hey, let's be conscious of the world we live in. But to restrict us completely of everything else, but then the elites of the world are like, yeah, well, we could fly.
We need our jets. We need our yachts. We need all this. Yeah.
Looks like I have to sacrifice, but you don't have to sacrifice. That's where I start getting into it. And I'm like, well, how come you guys haven't started a community garden? How come you guys aren't going in your neighborhood and cleaning up your neighborhood? That's how you start. You're worried about, we got to do hey, let me glue myself to the runway and then have my fingers cut off because I don't know if you've seen those activists in England. Yep. They use rubber cement and put it to asphalt, and it's like, dude, well, there goes those fingers because there's no way they can get it off.
Good Lord. And that's the whole thing with, Klaus Schwab and Davos and wanting us to be able to just rent everything. You're never going to own
World Economic Forum.
I mean, talk a little bit about that, because I know
15-minute cities eating bugs.
You guys have a fantastic song. I mean, that's the interesting thing, is because, now that people are starting to get aware of that, the cat's out of the bag, where the very last meeting, they had all those journalists show up and just ascended upon Davos during the big meeting.
And I won't say that the World Economic Forum is all, you know what I mean? Like, they're just one of many think tanks, and they're the most they're the most publicized think tank, because there's all these think tanks around the world that elites and governments go to be like, hey, how can we get people to go for what we think? Because I look at it in the thing of Thanos. I've said this so many times, but I look at it as Thanos, right? Thanos was like, I have to do this. He doesn't necessarily an evil person. Yeah. He just thought like, if I don't do this, everybody dies. So this is the way. And I think a lot of these think tanks think that way. Like, we have to do this because they're not smart enough to do it on their own. So they push people. And there's, the World Economic Forum, which Klaus Schwab is so tied into, like the whole transhumanist agenda. And we're merging man with biotechnologies, but they've talked about that plenty of times.
Epstein,
which why I don't like Elon. Epstein was into that. All these people like want that like synthetic human. They've been pushing that for a long time. But there's other think tank groups that not just think tanks, but I'll go back to Cass Sunstein, which has been a lot of think tanks. He has this other book that he wrote. It's called The Nudge Theory. And in the nudge theory is like, you don't force people to do things, but you take away things so that they kind of nudge them into that direction. So for an example, we see that China or CCP, let me not go China because I love my Chinese people, but the CCP is where I have a problem with. They have the social credit score. Now, how do you implement that in like a Western society? You can't just implement it. Like you couldn't come in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, even the 90s and try to implement it. But what they did is slowly but surely pick apart. Then we started seeing this cancel culture, which I believe is the blueprint and the catalyst to start everything off to get something similar. It might not be exactly like their social credit score, but then you see people canceling people. Then you have this polarization. So instead of saying, hey, this is how it's going to be, you make it look like, hey, like they did in 9/11. Look, these guys could all be terrorists. And you're like, they might be. Maybe let's get molested every time we go on a plane now because anybody could be a terrorist, man. Like we need the TSA to boss up on us and like take off our shoes and take us into the back room if need be because you could be a terrorist. We don't know, man. Like we had some guys do it. So, and I think that's the concept where they slowly break us down and then we want it. So I think they're doing it now even with the nudge theory, with policing.
That you want it because your neighbor's telling you you're going to be ostracized from the community if you don't do this. Like we're all doing this. And then people play ball. They tend to go along with what everybody else is doing. So it kind of goes back to the propaganda where they can slowly kind of boil that culture into being able to be okay with the social credit score or, and I think, everyone's kind of on defense and the cancel culture stuff. Some people deserve to get canceled. That Me Too movement and a lot of those people that got brought out into the open, I'm glad that their careers are over. But it sets the precedent to be able to use that type of that
weaponizing cancel culture though is a different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Canceling somebody because it's just culture where it's like everybody kind of just goes, that's just maybe it's just not needed. I don't know. Or it's something that you don't elevate or you don't promote as much. It could still be out there, but it's just not like maybe as in the culture. So it's canceled out of the main culture. But when it's weaponized to be like, we just don't like this
type of speech or what this person's saying, that's where I have a problem with it.
And going to the extreme of like where your
comedy got hit
jobs
hard.
And trying to get them fired, trying to make sure they could get no sponsors for an opinion. Now, like you said, if it's some pedo or like some weird things that they're doing, human trafficking, like, they should be under the jail. Like, there's no doubt about that. We don't want that even to be. Let's not even they should be canceled in a different way. I won't say
for sure.
Wink. But what I'm talking about too, what you could see is that they're doing with policing, in my opinion, what I'm seeing. So remember, there was the whole defund the police movement, and I have my own thoughts on policing. I see it differently. I think that there's a lot of things that we could improve on it. And I think that there is a lot of like, people say there's only a few bad apples. I think there's a lot more than a few bad apples. And I think that comes down to like these large police like facilities, like in the big cities and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But what they're doing is they're taking away the funding. You're having less cops. You're getting more crime. What are people going to want? They're going to want more authoritarian police. So you keep pushing like, hey, we don't need this. And that's what I think is, in my opinion, why Trump is going to win. I think they're showing all of this stuff happening and they're like, oh man, the world's horrible. Look at the economy. Look at the crime rate. And I think then when Trump comes back, people will be accepting of more authoritarianism because they're like, yeah, we need to, man. Well, if we don't, everybody's just going to get killed. Look at Chicago. Look at New York. If you just walk down the street, you're going to get mugged. You could get killed by a gangster. You could be human trafficked. They push us into that, and then we get into authoritarianism. And I think that happens all over the world. It's not like exclusively just to America, but I think that's what's happening.
You think it's going to be the Boston Dynamic robot dogs just running around the streets and the robots that are, because all that stuff's pretty advanced at this point.
Pretty weird.
Drone technology that could have weapons on those or tasers on drones. You could have all kinds of stuff. You could have, that is one of the weirdest, scariest, wildest thoughts. Like we see the SWATs and the vehicles that come out and then, like the riot gear and that stuff's wild.
Nuts.
But just think about the actual because even over in Ukraine and Russia, like they're using drones for certain things right over there, like to weaponize. So like they
remember they got submarine drones too. It's not just planes. It's like they got drone tanks, drone submarines, and then they have in Saudi Arabia. They've released. This was a while ago, so there's more of them. There's like robotic police out there, and that's going to be even worse. Like a RoboCop comes to you that has no thoughts or feelings. Is just going to let me exterminate. But the positive spin that I'll put onto all this is I call it the illegal cable theory. So illegal cable theory is like
cable theory.
Yeah, no matter what, the human, like, we're so resilient, right? First we had illegal cable, we had black boxes, they scrambled those, so we're like, all right, let's get in everything. We have a card in it. Then going for the cards, then he goes, hey, we could just get it straight from the wire and put it to our TVs. And they're like, all right, we're gonna mess with that. Then they got the little cards that you'd put for direct TV. Then we got the Fire Stick, so on and so forth. So I'm saying, like, where there's a will, there's a way. So if they do have drones everywhere, there's going to be some dudes hacking them for sure and doing funny stuff. So I do think that there is always a resilience of us, the working class, and as humans. But it just sucks that we have to get into these positions because we're arguing over stuff that's not being solved. Like, we're still arguing over abortions. Yeah, and it's like there's no middle ground. It's either you're a killer or you know what I mean, like. Like they're either like never should have an abortion or you could kill it at 5 years old. It's like, what? That's the extreme. Like, we can't find the middle.
Right. And they're trying to go after gay rights again. It's just like, bro, aren't we past this? Like, nobody gives a damn. It's just a big thing for everyone to fight over.
I'm arguing about that. Honestly, that you brought the gay rights stuff up. I'm arguing with I don't know, guy. There's this rapper that's a big MAGA rapper guy. His name's Bryson Gray. He doesn't respond to me because my Twitter's not. I'm sure if I had more followers and a blue check mark, he might respond back. But he's supposed to be like a devoted Christian, a rapper, and this and that. And he just talks nothing. He thinks gay is the ultimate sin and trans and this. And I'm like, bro, like, these are people, man. Like, regardless if you agree of their lifestyle and you can't understand it, that's okay. Like, I'm not telling you to be their best friend, but to not have any understanding and claim that you have Jesus Christ in your heart, like, that makes no sense to me. I think that's absurd to the people pushing that narrative. And he was even talking a lot about the trans, and I have my own thoughts on the trans thing. And I think it's manipulation. People are being manipulated. So how can I hate somebody that is being manipulated into something like that? That is devastating to their bodies and their whole life. But you got these factions of people, and then whether it be an intelligent agent propping them up or whether it just be the monetization factor of where, like, hey, I need to get clicks and likes. Yeah. But this atmosphere has built more hate. Like you said, like, what? I thought we solved it. Look, people could do whatever they want. Now, I understand when people are like, hey, man, you're trying to indoctrinate my kid. Only a parent should indoctrinate their kid. That's your kid. I understand that. But if someone just wants to do it, I don't care what a grown adult does, man. Like, you know what I mean? They can go to whatever thing that, even if I think it's weird, I don't have to go.
Right.
But everybody is like now on the left and the right. They're just really getting to, like, we want to force our ideology onto you. And I am against that completely from both sides. I'm like, I'll hear you both out. And sometimes you both make a couple good points. But now you're saying I have to be this way or I have to be. I'm not going to do that. And I'm the type of person, when you tell me I have to do something, I'm definitely not
going to do it.
Yeah, man, I'm with you there. That's me.
Oppositional defiant disorder.
Yeah, exactly. I'm immediately going to rebel against that idea.
Yeah, it's a safety net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little sad, though, because I thought we would be past that as human beings. That, like, not that, like we've got emotionally more mature, and we've, like, thought process. We've seen we have at least a large portion of history that we can look towards and seen things, and we've seen progress. And it's like they're trying to wipe all that progress out.
Yeah.
And that may be part of the Great Reset. And that's, I think, that's why we're seeing so divides on every level. Like we said earlier, there's these podcasts where they're calling them, chauvinistic and these dudes that are, like, talking down on women. But then you got this other side of podcasts where they're like, all men are trash. And then you got these other, like, people on TikTok that are like, oh, this race is bad, or this race is bad, or this culture. And they're just dividing, or this religion is supposed to be the right religion, or, hey, if you're a glober or you're a flat earther, you can't mix. It's like, what happened to discussions? What happened to us? Like, even in Bigfoot, sometimes people say that, like, oh, I can't believe you believe in quantum Bigfoot, or why? Do you know? Because do you have a Bigfoot? Have you met one?
Right.
Yeah.
And you're telling me I can't have a theory? I'm not saying it's for certain, but there's some evidence that has been based. It's not like we just came out of thin air. There's a lot of people like Ron Moorhead, that's been everywhere. That has, if he's allowed himself to adapt and change his mind. Other people are like, nope, it's only a physical being, a creature. Right. There's no way it could have any paranormal aspects to it. That's that. I think there's plenty of different aspects, and they do it with every topic though, whether it's political, whether it's paranormal, like with the alien stuff now everybody believes it because the government said, I'm like, the weapons of mass destruction. I'm not saying there's not aliens, but like, I don't believe the government ones.
I think they're just trying to get the conversation started and get the vaults kind of opening of what's been collected over all the years that's been denied that anybody's ever been looking at it type stuff. And I'm actually glad you said it
because all of a sudden they want that vault open?
My question is to Sean is, you're geopolitical mostly with the UFO, UAP stuff going on. If there are really extraterrestrials that are coming down here, and that's what's going on. Let's just follow me on this one.
Craft.
What does that do, right? Like geopolitically, how much does it just render geopolitics insignificant if there's somebody out there that could just wipe us off this planet? Do we care about geopolitics anymore? Because now we kind of got to get in line with.
It's going to bring everybody.
You know
together.
what I mean? Like if we want to get to that,
but I think that would be the point, right? That would be the point, especially when you're talking about like
Ronald Reagan.
And Ronald Reagan saying like, hey man, we'll unite. And I think in some aspects they want that because it would still be strategical. I just think they want it to look, because even a one world government, a lot of people have their theories on it. My personal opinion will be the same thing. It's just how things are running. It's still going to have Brazil. You're still going to have China. You're still going to have Russia. You're still going to have America, but they're going to all be run like this huge bank. It's like when say Bank of America is like, hey, I'm going to buy all these little banks. That's how I look at it, as they're going to absorb everything. So it's going to be even harder to get shit done because you only have a few people at top now. Like, so, and it's going to be so hard for us to get those messages because we're going to have layers and layers and layers and layers of bureaucrats, which to me, politicians are really bad. But I think even worse is bureaucrats, especially those long-term 100%. Bureaucrats that don't leave. And you're going to see, and I think that's the real thing that we don't focus on. That
Dude, I'm with
is
you.
Hurting the world. You have these bureaucrats that stay there for 50, 60 years, then pick other people, like-minded people, to do what they did and try to keep it continue cycle.
They're unelected officials that are in there because their cousin, their grandpa, their whoever it is, a family member, a friend, and then the next generation brings in their family member, the new cousin that's coming up. You're bringing up people through the system, and you kind of have a bureaucratic elite that are, up on this pedestal of like have this kind of secret power that, eventually is intoxicating to people. Oh, well, I'm not going to let you cut through this red tape. This is my job. I'm going to I'm going to hold firm and not allow this information to come out, or you feel like you're part of the team. And I think you're right.
If people think that's not a real thing, go into like some union shop, like go into like Chrysler, and then go like, hey, get the forklift. Well, forklift's guys on lunch. I don't drive the forklift. So it's even as simple as that. Be like, hey man, I only do this part. Right. I'm not going to do the other. So you're not going to get critical thinking in those atmospheres because you're like, I only do this piece and that's it. And I go home, chill out. You're not going to have people being skeptical because they're just doing and then they can come back. Well, I work for the government. Like, what do you really do though? Like, you don't do anything. You are just doing that little piece to push that paper further. And then the people at top are like deciding what we do. And that's why I think like politicians and bureaucrats are not just in like the NIH and the CDC. They're in the military, these generals that then become like go to Lockheed Martin or Raytheon after they, and then they're like, oh yeah, that's all right. And then that's all right.
Like the FDA to Pfizer, or you go from the WHO to Pfizer
to Moderna.
Just keep translating. So you're like, well, of course we're going to keep going to war if Raytheon. Of course we're going to tell everybody that there's a crazy disease, that they got to get on board on, whether people believe it or not. I always tell people, I'm not a doctor. Do what's best for you, but of course, there's going to be incentive to push that. And then the media is not going to talk about it because sponsored by Pfizer. Like, why would they ever be able to talk about it?
There was a whole lot of sponsored by pharmaceuticals.
CNN, every episode of
basketball,
CNN.
football games, whatever. I mean, just nonstop.
Well, the greatest example is the Sackler family when the opiate thing was really kicking, and they had to have that FDA agent sign off on the label packaging that said is non-addictive. Oh, that FDA.
No, they said less than 1%, than 1% addictive.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, yeah. FDA's like, oh,
what does that even mean?
But guess what?
Works 60% of the time every time.
A year later, that FDA agent was essentially on the board of science for Sackler.
I'm sure.
Making $250,000, $300,000 back in, I think this is like 1996. So he goes from making a government salary to balling out of control, working for the Sackler family as their head of science.
They just had something come out about them that they're not going to be protected in some lawsuit. I thought I saw there's some like
no, they are being protected.
They are being protected.
So what happened?
They're clean.
That after this lawsuit, they've somehow their lawyer worked it out. I mean, that's what the when you have a lot of money that nobody can ever sue them for this ever again.
Right.
Like it's done. Like they shut it. I'm like, wow.
Exactly.
So they're just like, we're gonna settle it. And the thing that's even worse is the people that are affected by it are not getting the money. The money's going to the states.
Right.
The
state is supposed to be distributing to like West Virginia.
You know how that's
Maine,
going to work.
Ohio, Kentucky,
you know how that's going to work.
All those states that really,
one for you, two for me, one for you, five for me. It's
right.
Jesus.
Well, that's
take
exactly,
a penny, leave a penny.
That's exactly how the IMF and the World Bank roll into these African countries. They give a loan to the country as a whole. The dictator ends up getting all the money, gives pennies to the people, and maybe creates a power plant. But all that money goes into the dictator's pocket.
Well, they've been getting shut out of Africa here lately. Newland was just in Africa. And they sent her packing. They're like, get out.
Yep.
We don't want any of your money. We don't want you to tell us what we have to indoctrinate our people with and what we have to get out.
Right.
Well, I like this one theory because one of my favorite podcasts is called No Agenda. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that.
I think I've heard of it.
They call it deconstructing media. Adam Curry, he used to be on MTV. He was on Headbangers Ball. He's one of the hosts, and him and John C. Dvorak. And what John C. Dvorak said is he was like, look, guys, he was like, this is a crazy, obviously I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he was talking about what if that Putin's is with us? Who would you at least expect to be part of the United States and doing the bidding of the United States? Because Russia's been in Africa big time. And the main person that we would want out is the CCP because they're all over Africa. It's natural resources over there.
Oh, yeah.
And then Russia did some things and they're like, well, we don't know how Russia, our agency. So you're telling me that all these agencies don't know how they're moving and strategically in Russia? You know damn well that they're following every single thing. So maybe that this whole thing that's happening is just another ploy for the United States, because a lot of people on the right that are big Trump people believe like Putin's a good guy. And I don't think so, because they're huge in Russia on biometric IDs. They also pushed the same thing that every country pushed. And he was also a WEF young global leader back. And you can't find it. You could dig, but there's some ceremonies that you could see a few things on. And he was, I think, inducted as he was older. So there's no real, and him close to George W. Bush, you know what I mean? Wearing that little outfit together. I just see that that's probably what they're doing. And what better way? Because they want the war.
Right.
But Russia probably wants it as well, because you're funding your oligarchs. We're funding our oligarchs.
Exactly.
Perfect. Let's wash.
Well, like you said, there's different factions. You have the kind of the old school Bush, what some people call the Nazi CIA, which is like leftover from Operation Paperclip. And there's a certain faction of the CIA
brothers
that has kind of taken the torch from that time. And then that's kind of like the Bush Clinton years. And, that's when they were kind of majorly in power. And so you have these like people that the elite banking cartels all are kind of controlling all these other factions that, like Sean said, they're all fighting with each other every now and then.
Sure.
Sometimes they work together. Like on the backside, they're puppeteering both sides of this war.
Oh, sure.
Because guess what? Not just the manufacturers of the military industrial complex companies making money from all that. The bankers are funding. All these groups are in debt.
The banks always make money.
They're the ones.
Banks always make money. And definitely in crisis do they make money.
100%. That's what people don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
Is you want to talk about the companies and the governments and, these kind of, secret black op programs and all these things. But at the top is where's the money coming from? It's all these
follow money.
It's all offshore banking cartels.
Yeah, they had
money.
I think Coca-Cola's had swastikas on them. You know what I mean? Like if they wanted to end World War II, why was Rockefeller sending oil to the Germans for the special oil they needed for the planes? Why was
that was the Dulles brothers
General
too.
Ford,
the OSS, the OSS with John Dulles and John and Alan Dulles, I believe. I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but yeah, they were like, oh, there's nothing going on over here, because they were making money. Like they were in special interest like that.
Yeah,
like they were reporting back to the U.S. like, no, there's nothing going on over here. Even though like the whole like Nazi war regime is firing up, they would report back like it's cool, it's fine. Yeah, because they had a lot of business over there.
They knew what was going on. They knew about the death camps way before anybody.
They slowed, but then they did, like you saying, Rockefeller was selling oil to the Nazis.
Yeah, and car manufacturers. I mean, I know Ford.
Ford was big in there.
They were selling car parts and tank parts and
wild stuff.
Boeing, was a part of a lot of things going on. It's just.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. Yeah. Make $1.
I know.
Make $1.
That's like where a lot of our identity came as a country, unfortunately, but like that, don't let a crisis go to waste. But us as a country didn't realize that's what they were doing. They're thinking like, oh man, we're protecting everybody. We have to police the world. You know, we had to join World War II, and maybe we did. I don't know. Right. Like I'm not going to defend the Nazis. Excuse me. I'm not going to defend the Nazis. I'm not going to defend what they did. And I think, like I was saying earlier, a lot of that was real and it was intentional to be real. And I'm sure they did that to experiment on people because they love to experiment on people. Yeah. That's what was happening in a lot of those camps. That's how we got, like you said, Operation Paperclip. And they brought more than just what they did with NASA. They brought this super soldier programs. And that's because then after that, that's when we go, oh, Russia got some of this stuff. We got some of this stuff. We're going to go head to head. And that's when we saw the Cold War. And that's why I think every now and then we get like these pissing contests with countries and leaders that are like, no, I want to be in charge. No, I want to be the king of the hill. No. We get into those, but in general, it's just bureaucrats. I don't know. Like I've been on this like kick and I've known this for a long time, but literally now I'm just like, it's mainly bureaucrats because if they believe the nonsense, the leader, look at the president. It's a new one every 8 years, 4 years, 8 years at the most, 4 years. What do they really know? And now I see them as like the manager of the country where they're going to go out there and like, yeah, no, the economy's good, man. Don't worry about that. Gas can be a little bit cheaper. They're just trying to calm down everybody, right? But they're not going to the real people. Someone that can make change is a bureaucrat. And they're not going to change that because there's nepotism. And like you said, nepotism runs deep within the government. That's why you constantly see the same things happen. Look at how long Fauci was in charge of all that. No matter, even though what happened with the AIDS epidemic and like everybody knows the bad things that happen. And they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. AZT.
All right, man. Probably telling the truth now.
AZT was killing people faster than AIDS. And Fauci was
way faster
pushing that shit. Hard. I mean, that's
and they stole that paper, right?
The film down
that French.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of wild stuff that's still got a lot of ways to go before it feels like things are going to be understood.
If you haven't seen Dallas Buyers Club, it's a great movie.
Watch that.
It's about that whole story.
Watch that.
Or have you seen Dope Sick?
Yes.
With Michael Keaton on Hulu. Great. Also,
I haven't seen that yet. I know about it. But
so good.
I've not watched.
Really, I like Michael Keaton too, man. He's a great actor, man. He's one of my favorite.
Fantastic.
Michael Keaton.
He's like one of those actors where you're like, he's kind of like my uncle, but he's not.
He was a stand-up.
He feels like he's part of your family, but he's not.
He can do it all though. He's like, he could do a serious role. Oh, he went from Batman to like you said, multiplicity. He can do it all, man.
Mr.
I love Michael.
It's great.
Mr. All classic.
What was the really strange one he did? Birdman.
Yeah,
I watched that recently with him and Edward Norton and a couple other. Is it Naomi Woods is in it or whoever? Great film, but yeah, he's very versatile.
It's in Spotlight. It's a great film.
Yeah, I remember watching that one with who's
about the Boston priest pedophile ring, the Catholic priest.
Yeah. Who's the guy that comes in as the boss? He's got a really interesting name on it. Liv Schreiber. Mm-hmm. Liv Schreiber's in that. Yeah, it's a great film. Very good film.
Yeah, I don't know. Where do you think all this is heading? Because I see a lot of positive things. I mean, I see, from time to time, there's some glimpses of people starting to kind of, work together. But I think it's just a matter of like getting through a lot of this propaganda and programming of just really looking at the whole thing of we're kind of all being played.
Oh, for
definitely,
sure.
We're all being played. I agree with that 100%. I think that you're right. I think a lot of people want to look at the bad parts. A lot of times when I'm saying stuff, I'm like, yeah, this is reality that people are trying to do some of this. That doesn't mean we can't stop it. Mm-hmm. And I think the way to stop it is very simple. People have like, some people laugh at me or they think like that's absurd. I think it's just treating people nicely, man, and having empathy towards our fellow man. Like, hold the door open for somebody. Right. Say hello to the cashier. Like, become human. Stop dehumanizing each other. The more we can humanize each other and see the importance and the value that we're all connected, I think that's the way to roll. But what happens is when it's like, oh, he hates Trump, I hate him, or he loves Trump, I hate him, or
right.
fill in the blank.
Yep.
We got to put that aside. Politics, or if you believe the earth is round, you believe the earth is flat, you believe Bigfoot's this, we need to go back, humanize each other and be like, hey, I disagree with you, but I'm down to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Unless it becomes something like, you know, detrimental where you're like, I can't hear. Like you were saying earlier, like if people are complaining all the time nonstop and you're like, hey man, if you don't want any solutions, you need to get away from me, because I'm solution oriented, man. Yes. And I think the best way to do it is being nice to each other, man. That's I do it way. Through the whole pandemic. Like everybody was like, I had friends that were like yelling at people like, I can't believe you're wearing, you sheep. I'm like, dude, what is that doing? That is reinforcing the image that they are seeing of people like me and you that have different perspective on what is going on right now. We don't know their lifestyle. We don't know what goes on with their life. We're not their doctor. Let them do their thing. And when I've seen people with masks, me not masking, sometimes they're a little bit, you know, sway away. But when I start talking to them and hold the door open for them, they pull it down, because I've now made them comfortable with me and going, you know what, he's a good guy. Why would he do that? And I think we got to try our best. And I get it. We all have bad days. I'm not saying every day, but if we try to strive for that, I think that is going to be way more productive than anything else, because nobody wants to listen to each other anymore. Like, let's have a discussion, a little debate, but don't take it personal.
Yeah.
And try to figure it out instead of just like going at each other's throat. Like, you're wrong, I have the answers. None of us do. Yeah. I'll tell you that. None of us do.
It's that social media disease too, of like people are used to scrolling through feeds and they scroll through conversations the same way. Like, oh, you said this, you hit this buzzword. That's not something I ever put in my feed, so I don't want to see it or hear it talk. Like, dude, have a conversation.
What I can't stand is when someone takes 1 or 2 sentences out of a 3-hour podcast and they're like, see, this person's a racist, or this person's this. Yeah. Like, that drives me nuts. Like, if you would pay, like, have you listened to this person talk?
Have you
listened to the full conversation or the context of what this person has said in the past, or going back 10 years in a tweet and crucifying someone because they said something dumb? I mean, I've said so much dumb shit in my life.
I'm going to continue.
I'm always learning, and give me an opportunity to learn. Give me an opportunity to grow. If I said or believed things that were horseshit in the past, and as I'm now older, I can look back and go, that was silly.
But this is also one of the reasons to not feel so strong all the time.
Let me grow.
Well, but that's one of the things too. That's why you know not to come in like, I'm going to hold on to this. This is the hill I'm dying on. I don't have a hill I'm dying on. No. I see a lot of hills out there, and I don't know which one's the right one. So I'm just looking at them.
You know, you gotta be careful.
Dude. But like being open to conversation, open to discourse, and open to, hey, again, like if we're both on theories, that's one thing. If you can present me different facts and we can compare facts, that's another conversation.
And open to be wrong, though.
Oh,
like
dude,
that's the problem. Is that
it's fine.
I know that I could be wrong, and be okay with, like you said, sometimes it will change if new facts arise. Mm-hmm. My ideas are going to change because it's going to refigure everything I'm thinking of.
Right.
It's ongoing. It's not set in stone, and too many people are rooted into these echo chambers, and they're reinforced with each other where they're like patting each other back, circle jerking, like, yeah, you're right, we're right. And then they go to like people like me and you, or go to another group that disagrees with them, and it's just toxic.
They don't know how to deal with that either,
then it becomes name calling.
Yeah, but they don't know how to deal with discourse either.
Yeah.
They only know how to deal with reinforcement, not a pushback. And so again, that's one of those where it's like, if you want to tell me why you believe what you believe or how you feel about something, that's great. And then that's where you actually get to reinforce why you feel that. It's like when you learn anything too, like if I teach you or tell you something that I'm learning with my work or on guitar or whatever, me telling you about it will reinforce my understanding and learning of it. Mm-hmm. If you can't do that in discourse and politely enough to like educate somebody else, then it's not like you're not really learning anything. You're just like dogmatically indoctrinating this rhetoric. That's not thinking.
Well, they're parodying a lot of stuff, and you see that a lot with whether it was like what was happening in 2020, or you see with flat earther people, whether you see on left or right, you see the same patterns over and over, like almost identical of what they're saying. You're like, dude, we've heard these talking points. You're not even coming up with something unique yourself. And we've mentioned a lot of times, we had Mario from Symbolic. I'm probably gonna mess up whatever. I always mess up people, but he's cool, dude. And he did an episode with us called the Flat Earth Rings. We call it the Flat Earth Rings. And he has this whole system of, he believes that there's all these rings, like 9 rings, and they like go with the zodiacs or 12 rings, whatever, inner rings, and they're all separated. They're all these own worlds. Hey man, I'm not saying that that's true or not true. That's interesting. You brought it into where you're like, hey, the stars do matter still. Hey, the zodiac signs do matter still. This does still matter. So you brought a whole new element, a new angle that has me thinking, like, I'm not saying it's true, but now I'm gonna look into it more, because I'm like, that's interesting. That does kind of make sense. Logic. When you were talking about Tartaria earlier, like we did an episode on Tartaria, right? And we talked about how, like, when you see, they said Tartarus, right? And that's supposed to be like, what it means, land undiscovered. You know what I mean? Right. That's what it means when it's written on a map. And then when you tell somebody, because they're so invested, because that's their life right now. It's a lot of these people that are not interesting enough. They tag onto something. The same thing with like the alphabet people, right? They hang on to this thing that's their identity. I always like, your gender is not your identity, man. That is just a small portion. Your identity is this whole like onion, like that you got to peel off all these layers to. If you're tied down to saying your gender or some topic is your whole identity, you got a problem. And you got to figure that out.
And you know, anybody that's done psychedelics, if you ever had an ego death, that's something that you learn real fast, is that you've built up this idea of what you think your identity is,
who you are,
and then you actually realize that all of that is horseshit. That you've been building up and creating your, you know, hey, I'm this cameraman, this director, I'm this, you know, this person that's interested in the arts. I'm Mike, I'm Justin, I'm Sean, I'm whoever it is. It's like, that's not really you.
Yeah, I'm this, like, whatever this space is that it lives with inside my head, just behind my eyes. I don't know what it is, but that consciousness, that awareness, that's what I am. Like, all this is like this kind of like biological robotic body, right? To me, like,
well, I think it also comes
helping
down
me experience the world and life and go through all these different, you know, moments.
It comes down to perception and perspective. So the perception of is like, hey, this is how the world should be through my eyes, but then the perspective is what people ignore of the big old picture of it. They're seeing that small little lens through their eyes, and not realizing, hey, man, it could be, there's so many more ideas. I remember, like, because I've been rapping for a long time, when I hit like 30s and, you know, you've had a lot of like struggles, you're just like, man, it's not going the way I want it to go. And later on, you know, you could see like, hey, I probably should have did this. I should probably done that, which would help me a lot more in doing podcasting. Cause now, you know, it was kind of not the same thing, but similar ways of routes to go to. But when there came a point, I think it was probably like about when I was 35 or 34, something like that, where pretty much I wasn't doing any music at all. And that had become the main focus of my life. Like, everybody knew me for that. Like, oh, this guy's going to rap right now. Oh, this guy's going to freestyle over here. Hey, he's going to do that. And I didn't have that anymore. And I moved to a new area. I'm in Michigan now where I don't really know anybody. So it was like this weird transition for me where I'm just like, what am I? Like, right? Like, if I don't do that, what do I do? So I can have some empathy for the people that are attached to that. But what I suggest is deroot yourself. I think it, like you said, either do it with like, like I did a lot of psychedelics as well through my life. And I think derooting yourself and killing that ego and trying to get perspective of like, well, what is this? What am I doing? Why do I have to be this? It really, in my opinion, it made me a much better person. Not that I was a bad person. I'm saying for me to excel and to achieve what I want to achieve, now I had more understanding of it because I wasn't rooted in anything anymore. I was like, yeah, you know, this could be. I've always had that mentality. I always play devil's advocate. I've always tried to critically think. But now I'm just like kind of really being accepting more of like, there's some things that I would shut down right away, right? And I still do. Like someone like, I will entertain you saying the CGI planes, whatever, for a little bit. But once I start showing... But when I have evidence to show the other way, it's hard for me to continue that conversation when you're not accepting my evidence. Now I'm like, okay, well, we can't talk. Because there's no reason for us to go back and forth. because you're so rooted. And I think that people need to deroot themselves or ego death, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. No, it's real.
Root yourself from those things and get away from echo chambers, man. The echo chambers reinforce too much stuff. And with these online chats, and we're seeing on Facebook, Instagram constantly, where they're just patting each other on the back. And that's why we do get a lot of flack on our show and on Instagram, because we have a wide range of people.
Yeah.
So we'd like to piss. My goal is to piss every single one of them off at some point.
Yes. Oh man. But here's the thing, you mentioned perspective earlier, and that's one reason I love history. And I've read, a lot of books like what happened after World War II and how countries were created, and literally like the power structures just essentially made all these lines, and now we're supposed to say that India is this and Pakistan is this, and these countries were just literally created out of thin air. And to know like how many things of our modern time was just literally created after World War II, and having that perspective of like, I've looked into history. I've read a lot about how authoritarian governments come to be. And a lot of it is through this kind of veil of communism or socialism or the fascist dictators, how they come up. And it's this
it's always,
slow
we're going to help you.
Boil
always like, hey,
and protect you. So when I can see, Yuri Gagarin, the Russian KGB agent that gave that interview, and we talk about this all the time in the 1980s, and you can look that, it might be scrubbed from the internet now, but he tells you the playbook.
It's still there.
Go to BitChute Rumble, you'll find it.
It's there. Yeah. It's there.
But you kind of see these long games that people, like you said, these different factions that have been running, and when something pops up about this UAP, like why the government's so involved and now coming out, I look back to all these other little tricks that I've seen in the past and read about in history, and your eyebrow has to raise. So kind of having that foundation of what happened in the past is so important for me to understand when things like COVID and this UAP thing start popping up, that you can go, there's something weird about what's going on here. And I don't know what it is, but my spidey senses are tingling a little bit that this is
there's tons.
Not right.
There's enough weird things. Like I have to like hold myself back because I don't even want to like fully launch into it headlong, because it's
exhausting, dude.
It's not exhausting. It's just
how do you go from complete denial to like I see this one funny TikTok. This guy goes like, "Hey, Jared," he's like, "Yeah." So we're not doing the student loan thing, man. And he's like, "Oh, all right, thanks for telling me, man." Like, and he's like, "But there's aliens." He's all, "We got a guy. Got the guys." He's all, "You got guys?" "Yeah, you got guys." He's all, "Is that gonna help us?" "Nah, but we got guys. Aliens are real." And it just ends, you know what I mean? And I was like, that's the perfect, really what it is they just want to throw it out there. And I still think, because I'm big on interdimensional. That's just me personally. That's like one of my things. I think there's so many aspects that we could believe in that. And that's where like I get into like even like cryptids. I think there's a lot of interdimensional aspects. But more than just that. That's not the only thing. But so I think there is aliens, but I think they're different than what we think of. Okay. But I think they're presenting it as this threat. And this might be a seed. Like people think like, oh, this is going to happen next year. This could be something that they're planning for 40 years. Like, hey, in 40 years, because technology is not as advanced as people would like to think. It is advanced. It has got a lot. And I know people go, yeah, but you don't know the technology they got. And I get that. But I still don't think it's there. Like the AI scare, right? That's what it reminds me with the aliens. They're like, oh man, we all got it. Everybody that's important in AI, Elon and everybody that has it. We need to stop. We need to slow down. It's going to get too crazy. No. We're catching up to you. The working class, because there was a lot of reports that people were hacking into like those Pixel phones and doing their own AI with ChatGPT and making their own versions of stuff. And they're like, hold up, we need to regulate this.
Right.
Because we need to push other people out of the market. We need to Tucker them. I don't know if you guys know about the Tucker, right? What? Like the automobile that like was during like, I think it was like the 50s or 60s. There's this guy Tucker that was coming out with the automobile. And he was telling people like, hey, here's the design. Pay me now. I'm going to get, kind of a prepay.
Crowdfund.
Well, Chrysler. Crowdsource basically, which now is all cool. But Chrysler and GM and Ford and Chrysler and GM were like, you're not going to do that. They sued him. And he only 60 or something like that. They put him through court so long. They made the guy go broke. Company went under.
Yeah.
No more. No more Tucker. Tucker doesn't exist.
Right.
Now you could, you could buy one, but they're super expensive because they're a rare car.
Right.
But you see, he tried to go up against the big boys who were already established. And I think that we see that quite a bit.
Well, that happened to Elon for a long time.
Well, John DeLorean.
Well,
John DeLorean. That's a fantastic documentary.
And DeLoreans are coming back, baby.
Yeah, but
those cars are coming back.
John DeLorean, dude, he was the all-star, superstar designer engineer at GM, Ford. He had worked for everybody. He went out on his own, and dude, they went after DeLorean. When he started getting legit funding, they made sure that no one would do, like, they had those cars ready to come out off the line, and basically they threw up every roadblock possible through the media, through government, to stop DeLorean from producing those cars.
They'll smear you. They'll talk about like, hey, they'll make lies about you. Like they did the same thing with Tucker. Like they were telling him like, he's a terrible person, or hey, look how he's taking advantage of everybody. Because at that time there wasn't really crowdsourcing as it is now. So like people thought bad of it, and that's what they're doing with AI. I'm telling you, man. Like they know that us regular people have that technology. We can do our own. We don't need them, and they don't get to get all the mass money that they want because it's now centralized all the money. Instead, it would be a little trickles here and there. Everybody would make their own little AI versions.
But yeah, they're kind of censoring ChatGPT in a way too. Like there's someone that's programming that algorithm that there's certain things that ChatGPT won't do for you.
Sure.
So it's already kind of censored in a way where they don't want those open source ChatGPTs like Sean's talking about, where that was, Michio Kaku talks about it, where
I don't think you want AI to just get it out.
They don't
on the
want,
internet and like
some people want that open source technology, but then you have.
I'm saying AI as an entity, like if it got out, like if an actual like sentient AI like process got onto the net and then jumped into like the cloud somehow. And then
I only think the only possibility of it being sentient is it actually having, if we want to go into like the paranormal world. Like I feel like if a fallen angel or some entity actually, I don't think it can. I think the way that AI, this is how I picture AI taking over, is just human beings not being smart enough. Like, be like, I don't know. The AI said that we have to go into this pit or we'll die, but it says that this is the only way to live. Like the people that had the GPS, and they even made fun of it on The Office, where they use the GPS and it's like, turn right, but there's a lake, turn right. You got to turn right. People have died from following their GPS because it takes them into the wrong place. So just imagine that if we're like, now, 20 years from now, they're like, ask the AI, the Emperor AI says you must eat rocks. And they're like, I guess that's what we got to do, man. Like,
I'm driving to a lake, eat rocks, whatever it's telling you to do.
I hope not.
Now talk about not critical.
But we won't, because we're going to be like, it's because we see the Wizard of Oz. So we're going to be like, hey man, there's a guy behind there. Like, you know what I mean? But the generations that don't know about that kind of stuff, that like aren't critically thinking, which I think they're trying to extinguish critical thinking and creativity, because I think creativity comes with critical thinking. Because if you're looking at like my big argument for a lot of these platforms is the lack of creativity, where it's the same NPC like shows. What you're seeing is like repetitive over and over. Like I don't know if you guys seen that. Yes, gang, like that kind of stuff. Right. It's literally come to like, I know people were talking crap about like Simpsons and Family Guy, like, hey, this is bad for kids. I'm like, dude, this is what's bad, because it's killing all creativity. It's not creative what they're doing. They just sit in front of us. I see people making so much money, and like, because my brother's big into Pokemon cards too. He's trying to do it, but they just unwrapping Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And they're making a killing.
Right.
I don't understand.
Yeah. And you have a lot of shows, and I won't mention them, but some of these shows that are just huge on YouTube, and it's like, wow, you look at like, who is this guy? I mean, is he just a guy that's some indie dude that just decided to make this show? Oh no, he's a former TV host. He used to be in bed with Nickelodeon, or used to, I'm not going to mention any names of this show, but it's also a giant podcast, and that has deals with iHeartRadio. You look into it and it's like, no, you're not just some indie dude making this cool show about, which is, it's Fortean. It's all Fortean style of the stuff that we cover. This show covers all of those. I'll talk to you about it after the show.
Yeah.
Well, I think they also take like podcasts like us and you guys and not take it, but like see our ideas. and they try to replicate it, but to their benefit, whether it be just some guy or people behind it, because I do think they want to saturate the waters and they want to dilute us to where we're insignificant, because there's not a lot of critical people in our space as much anymore. And we've seen that, like I was talking about, polarizing issues even beyond politics. When we're talking about aliens, people are like, you know what I mean? They're polarized over, it has to be this way. They have to come from the ocean or they have to come from space. Like, we don't know. And instead of just us having a discussion, it could be, it's probably both. You know what I mean? I mean,
they're probably
it could be both. It could be all, it could be
they've been here.
There's so many possibilities, but people are so worried about being right. You know what I mean? They have to be right. They're like, I have to be right, man. Because I guess that goes back to that rooting where their identity is based on them being right. And if they're not right, who are they? What are they? And they're afraid of that. And instead of going head on and saying, you know what? I'm just going to go head on. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep building myself. They're sheltering themselves. And I think that's also from the parenting. And the parenting is like that from the propaganda. Hey, there's terrorists, there's school shootings, Oklahoma City bombing. In the last 40 years of our lives, how much have we seen? War on drugs.
Seen a lot of stuff.
The West Coast, East Coast beef, Bloods and Crips, to like
Waco.
We could go forever. Waco, Ruby Ridge, you know what I mean? 9/11.
They just had this guy the other day they took out. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
I don't even know much about that, but man, that's wild.
In Utah, I haven't dug super. I haven't got into
very light
much,
topically. Yeah, it's just
Ruby Ridge situation.
They took this dude out.
Yeah. Well, the ATF is involved.
No, not Ruby Ridge. Just the other day in Utah.
All right, right. But I'm just saying the ATF is always the ones that are trying to find the gun, and that was the debacle, was the ATF with Ruby Ridge.
I think it's because they show up Waco. And they take the alcohol with the firearms and then they start shooting them.
Well, then the FBI shows up and they had gas to the
That's what I'm saying. The ATF shows up and they're like boozing and shooting guns. They're like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because David Koresh was no saint whatsoever, and he probably was a groomer as well. Because it's always weird. Because why is every cult leader, it's like, to be a cult leader, like, yeah, I gotta sleep with your wife.
Yeah,
like that would super deter me. I'm like, wait, what? They're like, hey, you want to be in this cult, but I gotta sleep with your wife. I'm like, no, man.
Yeah, no,
like,
I think I'm good.
But that always happens after like grooming you forever, and then all of a sudden, hey, by the way, I'm the Messiah, and I need to bang your wife.
That's not happening.
Hey, I just found out, guys. I didn't know this earlier. I'm the Messiah. Crazy, right? I'm gonna have to have you give me all your wives and
your money.
Anything you have. I'm in charge now. And
Jeez, man.
Yeah, and how many cults have been completely psychological operations that got out of control?
Well, that's what
I think a lot of
grounds.
What all this has made me thinking in the back of my head. The like background thought has been the whole like Kaczynski going to school, being kind of putting through those indoctrination, MK Ultra. And I think it's stuff like that is leaking through into the social media world and into everyday life. And again, even like Facebook, LifeLog, Facebook, right? Like Facebook is LifeLog. They are basically synonymous government program that turned into what is Facebook? It's a giant database.
And the next one started the next day.
It's a giant database.
That's why I don't know why people debate that.
Yeah. Well, and what did we talk about, a couple times too, is like, the whole concept of like, if you're getting a free service, you're the product. Like they're getting something from you. Our data now is the most valuable thing out there.
Yeah. More valuable than oil and gold.
Your personal data of what they can find out about how they can get money from you in some way, or forecast in the future how they could get money from you. Whatever it is.
To Bernays, it's all marketing.
Exactly. It's this giant system that got spun up and is really wild how it works. Because it's big. It's all money.
And these plans have been for a long time. It's these different, they've wanted to have the data, but to control with data, which is pretty much since like the early 1900s. But you couldn't do that, right? You couldn't just, because there's no way you were in. So they had to slowly integrate their way into people's homes, like with TVs and movies. And then when we have the internet, and then they control it though. But at the same time, these things become double-edged swords because we can also wield them. You know what I mean? I don't think they expected us to be so good with the internet. I think that's why they're censoring and trying to do their best to eliminate a lot. Like we did, I don't know if you guys ever dabbled into the dead internet theory, where like you go in. Oh, it's called the dead internet theory. We did a whole episode about it. Basically, what it is the internet's not as large as you think it is. This one dude does an experiment, like he puts pizza in my town, right? it says, hey, oh, we got 50 million. I'm not precise on the numbers, but you could try this yourself. Put like pizza or put truck. And it says, hey, there's 50 million pages of this. But in actuality, there's really only 14. It starts putting the same information over and over and over again. They've wiped off a lot of sites have been killed. Hyperlinks don't connect anymore. Mm-hmm. So how it used to be the Wild West of where you're like, remember how we used to all go to like, oh, this site. Oh, I never heard of that site. Oh, I go to this site. There's so many multitudes of sites. Now everything's been centralized. You go to Facebook, you go to Instagram, you go to Twitter or X now, right? X or whatever that may be. Most of these social media platforms, that's where you get your news. That's where you get your entertainment. It's been centralized when you used to go everywhere. And to come to find out that a lot of these other sites have been either neutralized because of a bad hyperlink, because they're not the upkeep wasn't there, or because they get some strange like copyright. Oh, at one point this website played a song from blah 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 or a movie clip, and they find ways to eliminate these sites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's those copyright lawyers.
So there you go.
If you've ever looked into copyright lawyers, dude, they are hitmen. Right. Those motherfuckers don't play. They will take your entire your entire company, and just completely eliminate you as a business owner, as an entity. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they'll find the tiniest little things within that law that will Adam Curry, you brought up Adam Curry's the podfather. I mean, he when he was inventing podcasts, essentially the protocol, which he basically just gave to Apple, and Apple made the mistake of not monetizing it when they could have. And Steve Jobs just loved it and made it free. But Adam Curry invented podcasting, basically. And what he had talked about was, how in the early days, how they would basically were just screwing with him and constantly getting, because they were so worried about that kind of open source idea and the technology that he was developing. It's
because he made the podcast index, and that's what he gave to Apple. Right. And that's what he's doing now still. And then that's what I love their show. That's kind of like what inspired me to do all this, is because they have like this different outlook. And I love when people are trying to do something different. Like they do the value for value thing. I love that. I think that's incredible. And then he's also working on that podcasting 2.0, which we all will be on because we're all in the podcast index.
Right.
So there's a bunch of new, and I've been promoting them a lot too. We actually tell people to go to our page a lot because it's like, why do we want you to go to Apple? It's cool. Like obviously if you're going to listen on Apple, cool, listen. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not going to say don't listen. Same thing's Spotify and all that, but we want you to go explore more. Stop centralizing. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do in everything. Why everybody goes to YouTube. That's why like when YouTube cancels people or kills their account, we're stuck like, oh man, what are we going to do? Everybody goes to YouTube. Mm-hmm. We have to get the public perception to be like, we don't all have to be on YouTube. There's plenty of other sites, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble. That's just the main ones that we know about. I'm sure there's plenty of more.
But those get such bad reputations for being these like Trumper, QAnon havens. It's like, well, it ended up becoming more conservative because they're getting censored so bad. And a lot of those shows, like even Tinfoil Hat and some of those definitely are not. I mean, Sam Tripoli's a wild man. Love him to death.
Crazy.
But you can't say Sam's a QAnoner or a Trumper or any of those things.
He's just a very bombastic
those get that
personality
label of being a place where all these QAnoners are. So if you're over on Rumble or BitChute, and it's like, well, people are forced over there because they're getting censored so bad on Facebook and YouTube. And it just so happens that the right, the conservative people are the ones getting censored. So they're the ones leaving and going to Rumble. So it becomes a bigger echo chamber to me. It becomes a bigger echo.
It's like a forced division.
What was that one? Remember that like supposed to be a Parler, right? I checked it out for like a week. And I was like, Jesus, man, this is a huge echo chamber. Like even though Twitter can be toxic, right? But I kind of like that they're like, that's why I like how we're fortunate enough to how we built our Instagram page where there's so many people. Like some people are strictly geopolitical, and we start talking about aliens, they're like, get out of here, psyop. You know what I mean? And then there's people that if we don't talk about like too much geopolitical, they're like, oh, what about the occult angle of this? So I do like that they challenge it because you don't want the same thing. I don't want someone to go, yeah, you're right. I don't want that. I don't want to be praised. I don't want to be idolized either. Like we're really big against idolization, and I think that's the other piece that people are idolizing people they don't know, that don't care about them. Like you're idolizing Trump and it's not even just Trump. I have my own thoughts about him, and I get why people win for him, but that's how they get it. So now we have labels. So without Q, you wouldn't have this like, oh, that's what that is. And to me, that's the blueprint of what we're going to label as a domestic terrorist. Is this right-leaning, alt-right, crazy lunatic incel that just wants to like kill people because of what he saw on 4chan. Then now we have a blueprint of a domestic terrorist, but then they're going to label everybody. And we're already kind of seeing some of that because you're seeing anybody that goes against the establishment. We hear about the conservatives nonstop, but what we don't hear a lot in mainstream media, and even the conservatives bring up, is that there's anybody that goes against the establishment. There's people that are just leaving the left and trying to be like in the middle and go for Green Party or go for libertarians or any other party, and they get censored and they get platformed for the same things. Because what is done to you will be done to me. You know what I mean?
That's the
people
thing.
Forget that when these laws happen.
Yeah, because when you're on the other side of it, you're not going to like when that group is in power. Guess what? They're going to use those same rules, laws to censor you. And that's why it's all so important that we uphold the freedom of speech, not censoring people. You know, I have a pretty hard stance on that because I mean, I've listened to a lot of constitutional lawyers, people that have stood up in court for the Ku Klux Klan, and I can't stand that shit. Fuck all those guys. But you do have these guys that will stand up for their right to speech, even though it's not the speech any of us want or want to hear someone be a racist piece of garbage.
Right.
But these constitutional lawyers will stand up for their right to say that. What you need is more speech. You need someone like Sean or, you know, someone like my brother-in-law to go up and talk to those people.
But think about this. One of the things that I think, do we still even do it in schools? Debate. Is there still a debate team? Do we still even do debates?
I don't know.
It's like it's not something that we're allowed to do anymore.
Pretty much.
There's a right and a wrong. There's no debating anymore. There's no figuring out the nuances of things.
You said this, you're done. I'm canceling you or you know, coming after you for saying this or this instead of, hey, well, you know, you might be wrong or you should not wrong, but you should think about it this way.
Right. I don't know. Is
there a famous story of the ACLU? Like some, I think it was the Jewish lawyer for the ACLU actually promoted, and it was like a Nazi. I'm not sure if it was Nazi or KK, but some kind of white supremacist thing that he totally disagreed with.
Yeah.
That he's not with them whatsoever. And he, like you said, he went to court and pushed it and said, hey, because if they silence him, they could silence me.
Absolutely.
We don't have
That's the whole point.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
And everybody, you know, people talk about, oh, well, what should we do with all these right-wing extremists that are going on Twitter and going on all these... And they're indoctrinating young kids that don't know any better. And I see that point totally. It's like someone that isn't available, doesn't have the ability to critically think for themselves, might look at what that person's saying and it resonates with them. And then next thing you know, they're in some right-wing extremist group. And I get that. Some people are going to get sucked into that world. But at the same time, you know, you can't just end those groups or those people in terms of like, you know, I guess you can say, because people are going to buy into stuff regardless, you know, but to take them completely off the platform.
Not having people, because parents aren't put, but parents should be restricted. You know what I'm saying? Not restricting
exactly.
Like my daughter, well, thankfully, like my daughter's older now. She's like going to be 21 this year. So I have little nephews though, and I have nieces, and it's just like watching what they're doing. Talk to them. Like, what are you into? Like, have an open relationship. And you know, they said a long time ago, I think Hillary Clinton was saying like, hey, children should be raised by a village. I disagree with that term, but what I've come to the my own spin on it is by a tribe, because a tribe is usually like a family, close knit. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A village, you just
share similar beliefs.
Like a neighbor that you don't even know, that has no interest.
Right.
Everybody that's in the tribe is usually invested in every single person that's in the tribe.
Right.
So you need that. Like, you need an uncle sometimes. You need an aunt to put you in line. You need a grandpa.
Yeah.
It's more than just parents. And sometimes I think that's what's happening. That's why I don't want to go too bad on parents, because I think they're in a bad position at times. And if they're not getting the right tools, they can't see the way to go. And sometimes it's a single mom or a single dad, or two parents are just holding on. They don't have the family structure that you need. And you need to build that, because nobody's paying attention. They're just throwing phones to their kid. Of course, they're going to be in alt left or alt right or these extremist groups because no one's paying attention and all they really want is attention.
That's right.
Bingo.
That's right.
And they haven't been taught. I mean, I see it. My kids, you would never find them in those forums. You know, the forum or the groups on Twitter or Facebook. You have to teach racism to them. They have friends from all backgrounds. I mean, our whole family is very diverse background, and they grew up seeing different people that looked different, that had different skin colors, that have, you know, different backgrounds. Their grandfather being Hindu.
Constantly,
And so you have to teach them.
They don't know any better.
No.
They don't know any different.
So
you know what I mean? Like what I mean is we grew up,
party yesterday,
we didn't have anybody different looking.
And you had all them kids in the pool, and every single one of them was different in some way. You're not going to find my kids on one of those platforms getting into those groups because it starts like Sean was saying.
Because they don't have that filter.
But those right-wing extremist groups are the ones. They're looking at the kid that doesn't have the father at home that's teaching him these things and didn't grow up with this open mind of, you know, we're all one or we all want the same thing.
Or socioeconomic too, if you're in a, you know.
They're poor.
Right.
And your parents are both on drugs. That kid comes into these groups.
Or even both working and you know, they work nights. And sometimes that's the case too. It's just like low income and they're not able, they're doing their best. That's why it's not always like it's these bad parents. I get it.
Sure.
Sometimes make it.
Yep.
But when you also have like bad talking points by like, again, I'm going to bring up those fresh and fit guys. At one point they said, you know, and I understand their point. He's saying like, hey, you know, it's a bad investment for a man to get into a relationship with a single mother, right?
Yeah.
Because that kid, you don't have the authority of that kid, which I agree. I think that if you are going to, especially a marriage, you have to be able to have some kind of authority over that child, or you're not gonna help them. But my argument that, and he's just saying it's so bad, like you should never. They always say you should never date a single mother, but then I started to think, in the same breath, they're also saying, hey, all these kids are messed up because of single mothers. Well, why don't you step up and be a man and go help raise that kid? And I'm not saying it will work in every circumstance. Like if they're not going to allow you to actually be a parent, then don't be in that situation. But if they are, then you need to, and maybe that child needs that.
Right.
And instead of just saying, oh, they're a single mother, well, let's fix the problem. No, because again, you don't want solutions. You want to complain. You want to just like the guy that's at work that's like, I hate this job. You've been here 25 years, and for the whole 25 years, you say that you hate this job. You know there's other jobs,
right? Quit. Yeah.
Like, go somewhere else.
I mean, American History X, in that movie, those kids were both growing up perfectly balanced. They had a good family. Their father dies, and down the road, guess who steps in?
They get chipped away at.
The guy steps in, takes them under their wing, starts feeding poison into the older brothers, into the older brother's head. He eventually brings his younger brother into the whole thing. And has to go to prison to realize that, you know, he meets a African-American cellmate and basically realizes that everything he's been taught is complete horseshit, and that his father wasn't there to pull him out of that. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're going to meetings, and then you're going to these like metal shows.
Yeah, but you could have a father that's just absent and get in the same vein.
Sure.
That's what I just said.
You can.
They are father.
Yeah, you can have that too. Or also because like I always I'm very blessed. Like my dad died when I was 12 years old, right? But the benefit that I had of it is that he installed so many things in those 12 years that like that is irreplaceable. Now, did I have a bad time for a little bit when it first happened? Like, there was a long stretch period because I started becoming stubborn because you lose your authority.
Yep.
It changed everything. But luckily that I had a dad that loved me so much and installed things that later on when I was able to pull myself out of the bull crap, I was like, oh, yeah, I should be like this. And with a great mom too. Like it takes a combo. But what I'm saying is that you got to install these. Like we might not be here forever. So let's install it as soon as possible. Let's not let them be a jerk. Let's let them be kind and empathetic towards other people. Let's teach them that people to not dehumanize each other.
Right.
If we don't, like you said, it's all taught. I'm with you. Racism is taught. It's taught. Like I wasn't taught racism, so I didn't think of it. Like now talking to people later down the road and them telling me like, hey, this person treated me like this. Okay, I can say and validate that is a thing, but of course I was oblivious to it because I didn't know there was any different. I still to this day, everybody, if you're good to me, I'm gonna be good to you. You show me respect, I'm gonna show you respect.
Yep.
Respect and loyalty is what I was taught. Those are the most important things in this world. But don't be loyal to people that aren't loyal to you. But if they're loyal to you and they respect you, give it back.
Reciprocate.
And that's what we're lacking. We're lacking people to actually step up and be men. And a lot of people blame it on the women. I think it's men. And not trying to put it all on men's shoulders. What I'm saying is that break out and critically think, get out of this box. And maybe you have to be that stepdad for that kid if you want the world to change. And if you don't, then don't complain about it, because you're complaining about it and you're not coming up with any solutions. These kids need people. Go be a mentor. You don't have to be with a single mother necessarily. Go into one of those Big Brother programs. Go into something that you're contributing back to this world. If you're not, you're just a complainer, and we don't want to hear you talk.
Dude, solid.
Beautifully said. Well said. Sean Chris, thank you so much, man. I think we're going to wrap this up.
I think you nailed it right on the head there.
That was beautiful. Yeah. What a way to end the show. Sean, if you want to just let us know one more time where we can find you, a little bit more about the show, the social medias, and we'll wrap this baby up.
Yeah, well, you can find us all at killthemockingbirds.com or check us on Instagram, Kill the Mockingbirds Podcast, or Sean Chris Music on Instagram. That's where you can find all like my music and stuff. You can find Sean Chris on all music streaming platforms, whichever one you choose. We have a variety of shows. We got me and Joel doing the flagship show every Thursday, Kill the Mockingbirds. Every Monday, you get a nice little surprise with some ginger snaps. Joel Thomas going off on a nice little rant on somebody. And then you got Wednesdays, Conspiracy Gangster, with me breaking down the propaganda that we see every day on the news. And with our other 2 monthly shows, we got Ban Syndicate with Juan Ayala. And then we got Floating Mushrooms with our buddies Jay and Justin from Cryptids of the Corn, all on the same platform. Come check us out. You can find it all at killthemockingbirds.com.
Dude, great stuff. Awesome. Thank you again, Sean Chris, everybody.
That was excellent. Dude, Sean, you rock.
Much love.
Thank you for
great conversation.
Hell yeah, man. Anytime.
And we'll be back. We're going to outro the show. Don't go anywhere, Sean. We'll be right back. But Sean Chris, everybody, Kill the Mockingbirds Podcast. Freaking unbelievable
Put a
conversation.
bow on that one.
Yeah, that was dope, man. I love getting in deep. Like I said, this is always a fun one for me because we don't always get to explore these kind of conversations. So I feel light. I feel refreshed. And I feel like
I just like good conversation. I like thought-provoking conversation. I want to
think a little bit.
I want to turn the gears. I don't want the easy you don't agree with me on this. Well, we don't talk, or I don't. That's dismissive to me. I like conversation that gets stimulated and we get further with something, or we come out of it with a deeper understanding between the two of us. We go, hey man, we really worked something out there, figured something out there. Otherwise it's all Truman Show shit and it's all figured out already for you. Mm-hmm. Everything's predetermined. All the feelings and interpretations you should have is already decided for you.
Yeah. And I
don't agree with that.
Push back. If it doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Push back a little bit.
Right.
Everybody kind of just goes along to get along. And it's I've been over that.
You grow through what you go through.
Yeah. But yeah, very thought-provoking episode here tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys go check out Necromechanimal on Instagram, doing all the post-show edits for us.
Absolutely.
Just always crushing it. He does a bunch of awesome art for other podcasts that you should go check out as well. You guys can find us at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We are the Facebook group Strange Road Hitchhikers. Subscribe, share this video on YouTube. If you guys enjoy the podcast and you're listening on whether it's Spotify, Apple, leave that 5-star rating. We really, really appreciate that. It does help out the show a lot. And thank you for your support.
We appreciate it.
It's been a good one.
We try to make it fun, entertaining, informative, thought-provoking every time.
Absolutely. Did I miss anything?
No, I think Stoner and Disbrow, as always, riding deep in master control. The best of the
there
best.
They are. What's happening,
Hard
fellas?
At work, man. Look at all the heat coming out of there.
It's just emanating.
It's just rising.
All right, get ready for that door to open and that fan to turn on. Here we go.
That's right.
All right, guys, we're signing out. We got to cool off the boys. Peace.
Later.